Hey guys, tonight we are leaving behind our familiar sanitised world and slipping straight into the heart of the Middle Ages. Imagine the air is thick with wood smoke, and cobbled streets twist like secrets under the yellow haze of torchlight. You trudge along, boots caked in the day's mud, heart quickening as laughter spills from a low-timbered building ahead. You're about to open the door to a medieval tavern, and fair warning, you probably won't survive this in one piece. At least not with your dignity or your modern comfort standards intact. So, before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 AM, or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey, together, here on Timeless Sleep. You arrive at the tavern door, battered by countless hands and shoulders over decades. Its heavy iron latch squeals in protest as you lift it. The scents hit you first: smoke, wet wool, roasting onions, the faintest tang of spilled ale, and something more earthy you can't quite place. Warmth rolls over your cheeks as you step inside, banishing the night chill that's settled into your bones. Torches flicker along the rough-plastered walls, each flame a trembling halo reflected in old greasy glass. The room brims with life. Farmers with hands like spades crowd benches, their voices weaving a wall of noise, cheers, shouts, and the uneven rhythm of mugs thudding on tabletops. A potboy in a stained apron darts through the crowd, slopping ale from a battered pitcher into cups that never seem empty for long. Someone somewhere is playing a tune on a pipe, thin and reedy, barely audible over the cacophony, yet your feet tap along almost without thinking. The floor underfoot is sticky, scattered with the day's sweepings, rushes meant to soak up spills and occasionally to hide the worst of the mess. Not for the last time tonight, you thank yourself for sturdy shoes. As you sidestep a puddle of something suspicious, a dog, one eye milky, the other sharp as a coin, skitters past your shins, a bone clamped triumphantly in its jaws. It's a far cry from the polished pubs of the 21st century. But this is the lifeblood of medieval town life, the true meeting place of everyone from blacksmiths to beggars. A historical truth settles in. For most people in this era, homes were cold, cramped, and offered little privacy or comfort. The tavern was not just a place to drink, but to warm up, to swap news, to feel for a moment like the world was a little larger than your front door. The people here come for the warmth as much as the ale, and, despite the rumours that every mug could host a dozen swimming things, you sense genuine joy in their gathering. A man 2 benches over waves his hand as if summoning a spirit from a bottle. His laugh erupts, loud enough to startle the drowsing cat curled atop a nearby barrel. You catch a snatch of his story. Something about a priest, a pig, and a market day gone disastrously wrong. Every tavern has its regulars, and he's clearly one of them, face ruddy from too many evenings spent beside the hearth. He slaps his thigh in delight, and a spray of crumbs rains down on the floor, promptly inhaled by the ever-hopeful dog. A woman with sleeves rolled to her elbows scolds him gently, eyes glinting. You can tell she's the sort to keep things running when the tavern keeper's back is turned. Her apron is patched and her hands are quick. In moments she's refilling mugs, clearing plates, and offering a wink to anyone who catches her eye. There's an easy camaraderie here, built not on politeness but on necessity. When you spend most days wrestling with muddy fields or smoky fires, the chance to share a joke, however small, is worth more than a coin. A quirky tidbit: the rushes scattered across the floor aren't just there for cleanliness. In fact, they are rarely changed, and over weeks, or even months, they trap food scraps, spit, ale, and whatever the night's revelry brings. Historians still debate whether this tradition made taverns more or less hygienic than the cramped homes outside. Some believe the fresh herbs sometimes sprinkled among the rushes masked unpleasant odours, but others suspect it only provided a cosy nest for fleas and mice. Tonight, You try not to look too closely. Someone jostles your elbow, and you realise with a start that finding a seat here is a delicate dance. No one sits alone for long. Benches are communal, elbows pressed tight, and newcomers must learn the unspoken art of sliding into a gap without upsetting anyone's mug. You spot an opening near the fire and, with a nod of gratitude, squeeze yourself between a barrel-chested cooper and a young apprentice whose boots barely touch the floor. They eye you, curious, but a shy smile or a muttered greeting seems to be the ticket to belonging. The fire crackles, casting a golden shimmer over faces. On the wall above the hearth, someone has nailed a horseshoe for luck. It's blackened with soot, the iron curling at the ends like a cat's tail. Superstition runs deep here. People believe a tavern without lucky charms is inviting trouble, or worse, the attention of a wandering spirit. Every so often, a gust of wind rattles the windows, and the room quiets for a beat, each patron pausing as if listening for more than just the weather. Your senses work over time. You note the heat rising from the fire mingling with the tang of smoke and the scent of bread crisping on the coals. The tavern's beams are thick with the wax of old candles and the faintest trace of damp from the thatched roof above. The voices blend into a river of sound, sometimes surging, sometimes ebbing as a story lands or a song is struck up. You catch another glimpse of the world outside. Through the murky window, the street glows faintly under the moon. A pair of travellers huddle near the door, stamping their feet and shaking off the night. One carries a staff, the other a bag slung over her shoulder. Strangers, but not unwelcome. In this place, almost everyone is from somewhere else, or so they claim after a few drinks. The drinks themselves are a study in medieval resourcefulness. Ale is the staple, frothy and sharp, brewed with whatever grains are cheapest that week. Some say the best mugs are those with bits of bread floating on top, a sign it's been shared by many. Or perhaps that it's time for the next batch. If you're lucky, you might be offered mead or even a touch of spiced wine, though those luxuries are rare and usually reserved for travellers with heavy purses. A joke passes around your table. A monk, a miller, and a chicken walk into a tavern. Only the chicken leaves with any money. It earns a round of laughter, not because it's clever, but because humour is currency here, traded freely and sometimes a little too loudly. In the shadows, an old man nods along, his eyes half shut. He claims to remember when the king himself stopped at this very inn, though which king, and in what century, changes with every retelling. You lean back, letting the atmosphere settle over you like a thick woolen cloak. For all the noise and bustle, there's a deep sense of safety here. Beyond these walls, wolves and thieves prowl the roads, and illness or famine is always lurking at the edges of daily life. Inside, the worst threat is an over-enthusiastic bard or a spilled mug. People crowd close, not just for warmth, but for the comfort of familiar faces and shared struggles. Historians still argue whether taverns were truly places of refuge for everyone. Some claim they were open to all, a rare leveller in a stratified society. Others note that rules and unspoken codes kept the poorest at the fringes. Tonight, as you watch a ragged man edge into the firelight, clutching a battered hat, you wonder what it must have felt like to be truly invisible in such a crowd. The serving woman offers him a crust and a wink, and for a moment the tavern seems to belong to him too. You notice that every wall tells a story. Shields, daggers, faded bits of cloth, trophies or lost property, it's hard to tell. A child dashes between legs, chasing a wooden top that skitters dangerously close to the flames. Someone shouts for him to watch out, but the boy only grins, cheeks red with excitement. There are rules here, but they bend and twist with the needs of the night. Suddenly the air shifts as the door swings wide again. A figure stumbles in, face streaked with the day's grime, voice raised in greeting. The crowd responds with a cheer, half mocking, half welcoming. New arrivals mean new stories, new rounds, and maybe, if fortune favours, a tale worth remembering come morning. You marvel at how quickly you've faded into this world. The candlelight is softer now, your eyes adjusting to its gentle glow. Your body relaxes into the lumpy bench, muscles unwinding with each mouthful of warm, yeasty bread. The taste is simple, rough at the edges, but deeply satisfying. You know there's more to this night. The promise of music, of whispered secrets, of the endless push and pull between chaos and comfort. But for now, you're simply here, wrapped in the noisy, smoky, ever-shifting embrace of the medieval tavern. No modern distractions, no worries about tomorrow's headlines, just you, a crowd of strangers, and the odd, timeless pleasure of belonging, if only for a night. Your elbows on the rough-hewn table, you begin to realise that a medieval tavern is less a building and more a living thing. A beast with its own moods, its own unspoken rules, and a fierce gatekeeper at its heart. Tonight, the tavern keeper, or hosteler, stands behind the bar with arms folded, hawk-eyed and unmoved by the waves of laughter or the shouts from a group in the corner. You sense at once that this person is more than just a bartender. The keeper is judge, jury, and on occasion the reluctant peacekeeper when too much ale makes tempers run high. You haven't been here 5 minutes before a subtle nod from the tavern keeper meets your gaze, silently sizing you up. New faces mean potential coin, but also potential trouble. In medieval towns, the arrival of a stranger could make people suspicious or excited depending on how long the night had been without new gossip. The keeper's rules aren't written anywhere. They're etched into every sideways glance and every wary nod. You notice the regulars rarely step out of line, and when they do, a sharp word from the keeper is enough to bring the room to order. Respect is currency here, sometimes worth more than silver. You fumble for your purse, suddenly self-conscious. Payment up front is the norm, especially for out-of-towners. There's an odd comfort in knowing that this rule hasn't changed for centuries. The keeper's eyes narrow, then soften just a touch as you place your coin on the scarred bar top. It joins dozens of others, some dull, some gleaming, all watched over like treasures in a dragon's hoard. As the night deepens, you spot more of the invisible lines that divide and bind the crowd. Groups claim corners or benches by the fire, each cluster with its own rituals and rhythms. The blacksmiths, still smelling of hot iron and sweat, thump each other on the back and swap work tales. A pair of merchants, neat and reserved, huddle in serious conversation, voices barely above a whisper. You see that certain seats, usually near the bar or within easy reach of the fire, are always reserved for regulars, and woe betide any newcomer who takes one without asking. A young man does just that, and after a few cold stares and a mumbled warning, he quietly slips away to a quieter corner. Etiquette here isn't what you expect. You're expected to toast your neighbours, to nod or offer a word of greeting. Failing to do so marks you as either suspicious or impossibly rude. It's a dance, really. A delicate balance of friendliness and caution, of knowing when to speak and when to simply listen. Some patrons bow their heads before every sip, a superstition meant to keep away evil spirits said to linger in alehouses after dark. Others trace a pattern on the table with their finger, a charm perhaps, or a nervous tick passed down from older generations. One oddity you soon notice. The keeper never pours drinks for children, but no one bats an eye at a teen with a mug of weak ale. Water is rarely served. In fact, medieval townsfolk would rather trust a stranger than trust their local water supply, which more often than not is as lively as the tavern itself, but for all the wrong reasons. Historians still debate the real reasons for this preference. Was it because water was so dangerous, or simply a matter of tradition? You sip your drink with a sudden burst of gratitude for modern plumbing. You also quickly discover the one-mug rule, an unofficial law that every patron seems to know. Each mug is filled, emptied, and refilled in a rhythm that never quite slows. But the keeper or serving woman always keeps an eye out for anyone who drinks too fast or too much. The penalty isn't written on any signboard, but it's universally understood. A sharp word, a cold shoulder, or, in more severe cases, an escort to the door. Drunkenness, while tolerated, is never indulged. The keeper runs a tight ship, and every regular here wants it to stay afloat. There's another layer to the rules, more subtle but just as strict. Outsiders and travellers are treated with a blend of curiosity and suspicion. The first round comes easy, the second is offered with a question. So what brings you here? The wrong answer, too boastful, too secretive, can lead to an evening spent in frosty silence. But if you're willing to share a story or laugh at yourself, doors begin to open. The tavern keeper often plays the role of host in these exchanges, subtly guiding the conversation, keeping tempers cool and ensuring no one feels too left out or too targeted. Quirky as it seems, there are also strange house rules that vary from tavern to tavern, often born from local legend or superstition. Some keepers hang garlic braids by the door to ward off evil. Others sprinkle salt on the threshold or insist that guests tap the lintel as they enter. In one notorious alehouse, the custom is to leave a shoe on the windowsill, supposedly to keep goblins away from the barrels in the cellar. Tonight, you see only a battered horseshoe nailed above the door and a sprig of yarrow tied to the bar's end. A nod to some half-remembered charm for luck and safety. The keeper's voice, when it finally comes your way, is low but clear. You look like you could use something to warm you up. It isn't quite an invitation, but it isn't a threat either. You nod, grateful for the attention, and she slides a mug your way. Her hands are strong, the nails stained with years of handling barrels and chopping wood for the fire. You notice her glance, never lingering, always moving from face to face, weighing each guest's mood, catching trouble before it starts. It occurs to you, as you sit with your hands wrapped around the mug, that the tavern keeper is as much a guardian as a merchant. There are stories, some true, some wild exaggeration, about keepers who saved entire towns by locking out a plague carrier or warning the local lord of a bandit's approach. Historians still argue whether these stories are legend or fact, but there's no denying the sense of authority that lingers around the bar. In a world without phones or police, the tavern keeper is both the social network and the emergency services, and sometimes the secret keeper for half the town's hidden scandals. You watch as she settles a dispute between two regulars. One swears his coin was taken, the other claims innocence. Without missing a beat, she produces a battered wooden bowl and proposes a game of chance to settle it. Both men grumble but comply, and within moments the room is cheering and shouting as dice clatter across the table. The loser accepts his fate, the winner buys a round, and the keeper gives a quiet nod to herself before moving on. It's a little performance, one she's likely done 1,000 times, each act diffusing tension and restoring order before things can turn ugly. Amid all this, you spot another quirk, the way regulars greet the tavern's resident animals. The dog from earlier makes his rounds, tail wagging, and the cat, now awake, stalks the beams overhead, searching for mice. In some taverns, animals are more than pets. They are mascots, believed to bring luck or ward off misfortune. It's whispered that a tavern without a resident cat will soon fall on hard times. Tonight, you slip a morsel of bread to the dog, earning a grateful thump of his tail and perhaps a little extra luck for yourself. As you settle in, a round-faced merchant leans across and asks, "First time in this house?" He smiles, showing more gaps than teeth, and you nod. The regulars are quick to offer advice. Don't complain about the food, don't spill your drink, and whatever you do, don't try to outsing old Jacob in the corner. His voice is a legend, part songbird, part thunderstorm, and he's as much a fixture as the fireplace itself. You begin to realise that every tavern has its own folklore. In this one, the story goes that the last person to insult the inn's black cat woke up the next morning with all their hair gone. Another tale has it that a serving girl once outdrank a visiting knight, winning free ale for a year and a marriage proposal she politely declined. These stories, half believed and wholly repeated, are as important as the food or drink. They remind everyone that the tavern isn't just a business, it's a living scrapbook of the town's oddest moments. A joke ripples through the crowd, something about a friar who tried to bless the beer and ended up turning it sour. It draws laughter, some genuine, some polite, and you catch the keeper's rare smile. In the corner, two young women whisper together, occasionally glancing your way. They're curious about newcomers, but in their own time. You get the feeling that, in this tavern, patience is rewarded. Trying too hard or too fast will only raise eyebrows and close doors. Another oddity, the way silence can fall suddenly and without warning. All it takes is a new song, a shouted warning from outside, or the distant clang of the town bell. In those moments, every face turns to the keeper for reassurance. Sometimes she shrugs, other times she moves to bar the door, but always with calm authority. Tonight it's only a false alarm. A cart rattling past in the dark. The tension breaks and someone raises a mug in a silent toast to safety. It's not all rules and rituals, though. There's a playful side to this place, a sense of mischief that bubbles up in the games, the jokes, the sideways bets made with a wink and a nudge. You see coins change hands over whether the next person through the door will be a merchant or a minstrel, or whether the dog will catch the mouse before the cat does. The keeper pretends not to notice, but you catch her smirk as a copper piece rolls across the floor. As the hour grows later, you realise that these customs, strange, strict, and sometimes silly, aren't just about keeping order. They're about making everyone feel like they're part of something. Whether you're a regular or a first-timer, whether your purse is full or nearly empty, the rules give you a way to belong. Historians still puzzle over why these small rituals endured for centuries, but tonight, as you laugh at a clumsy toast or lose a coin in a quick game of chance, you understand. In a world that could be cold and uncertain, the tavern keeper's rules are a thread of certainty, a promise that just for tonight you are welcome and safe, so long as you play along. The fire is burning low now, casting long shadows on the walls. The keeper stirs the embers and glances around the room, making sure each patron has what they need. You lean back, savouring the warmth and the sense of belonging. Outside, the night may be full of dangers and doubts, but here, within these four smoky walls, you have found a kind of sanctuary, not just from the cold, but from the loneliness that haunts so many medieval nights. The next thing you notice, once the tavern's social rules have worked their peculiar magic, and you've earned a tentative spot among the regulars, is the aroma that truly defines a medieval public house: food. It rolls out from the kitchen in heavy smoky waves, carrying the memory of every meal cooked in the same blackened hearth for generations. Your stomach growls, uncertain whether to feel hunger or suspicion. Here, dinner is not a plate neatly set in front of you, but an experience that involves all your senses, plus a bit of luck. The first platters emerge from the shadows beyond the bar, borne aloft by bustling hands. There's no formal menu. The day's offerings depend on what was caught, baked, or scavenged. In the deep heart of winter, you're likely to find a thick pottage, something between a soup and a stew, brimming with whatever root vegetables, grains, and salted meat could be found. On better days, the innkeeper's table groans with roast fowl, hunks of bread still warm from the bakehouse, hard cheese, and, for the lucky, a wedge of honeycomb that glistens golden in the firelight. A trencher, a slab of stale bread, or, if you're lucky, a wooden board, lands before you. The bread is so dense you half wonder if it could double as a weapon. A ladleful of steaming pottage is poured over it, soaking into the crust and softening the centre. For a moment you hesitate, eyeing a suspicious lump bobbing at the surface. Someone beside you, a woman with laughter in her voice, assures you it's just a bit of turnip. Or maybe last week's mutton if the wind's right. She grins, and you take your first bite, surprised at the robust, earthy flavour. Medieval food, you quickly learn, is as hearty as it is mysterious. As you eat, you're treated to an endless procession of flavours and textures. The bread is rough, made from barley or rye. Wheat is rare and expensive in most medieval towns, reserved for those with coin or rank. Every mouthful is a study in contrasts, the sweetness of stewed apples, the salt tang of preserved pork, the faint bitterness of a sprig of bittercress tossed in for health. The cheese is sharp and crumbly, its blue veins hinting at a tangy surprise that lingers on your tongue. Someone passes a wooden bowl of beans, flavoured with onion and garlic. You reach for it, only to be gently rebuffed. That's for the table. Food here is communal, served family style, with everyone dipping in, sometimes with hands, sometimes with whatever utensil comes to hand. Utensils, you notice, are scarce. A wooden spoon might be offered if you ask, but most people use their fingers or a crust of bread as both tool and plate. Forks, those tiny tridents of the modern world, are rare and vaguely suspicious. Historians still argue whether their slow adoption was due to cost, superstition, or a simple love of eating with one's hands. Tonight you watch as even the wealthiest guest scoops stew with fingers, laughing as a bit drips onto the table. In a medieval tavern, table manners are flexible. The only true crime is wasting food. Or worse, taking more than your share before others have had their turn. With the food come the smells, rich, comforting, sometimes startling. Roasting onions and leeks, garlic crushed beneath a heavy stone, the sharp scent of mustard seed pounded for a rare sauce. Some patrons bring their own flavourings, pulling small packets of herbs or salt from the folds of their cloaks. You spot one man with a twist of precious saffron, which he doles out like gold dust over his plate, earning envious glances from the rest of the table. It's a reminder that even in the communal, rough and ready world of the tavern, little luxuries matter. Not every bite is a delight. Sometimes, a stew might be stretched with too much water and not enough meat, or a pie filled with questionable leftovers. Spoilage is a constant threat, and while the fire does its best to mask unpleasant odours, your nose is your best defence. You catch the innkeeper watching your face as you sample the pottage, waiting for a wince or a compliment. There's pride in a well-fed table, but also resignation. Everyone here has had their share of bland, burnt or downright inedible meals. Still, food is celebration. When a pig is roasted on the spit, the entire tavern comes alive with anticipation. Jokes fly faster, songs grow rowdier, and even the dog gets in on the feast, dancing on hind legs for a scrap of crackling. A lucky few might get a bite of marrow scooped from a bone, believed to bring strength and fortune. If there's a wedding or festival, the keeper might bring out pickled herring or sugared nuts, delicacies that make even the toughest farmer pause in delight. There are also quirky customs. Bread, for instance, is sometimes marked with a cross before it's broken, a holdover from religious tradition, or maybe just a way to ensure good luck. If a loaf falls on the floor, it's kissed and pressed to the forehead before being returned to the table. A spilled mug of ale is met with a chorus of groans and a quick toast, to luck next time. Sometimes a coin is slipped beneath a bowl to ensure the cook's favour, or at least a larger portion. Historians still debate the origins of these rituals. Were they true superstition, or simply ways to make a meal more meaningful? Of course, not everyone eats the same. Wealthier guests can afford finer cuts of meat, perhaps a rabbit pie or a slice of spiced sausage, while the poor make do with bean stew and the hard ends of cheese. But even the humblest dish is shared with a kind of rough generosity. Tonight you watch as the woman next to you offers a stranger half her apple, laughing, for luck, or maybe because you look hungrier than me. Hospitality is a virtue here, and stories circulate of travellers welcomed with open arms and empty purses, only to repay the kindness years later with a cask of wine or a sack of flour. As the meal progresses, the noise in the tavern rises, voices warmed by food and ale. You find yourself leaning in, catching snippets of conversation, the harvest, the coming frost, a neighbour's new baby, or the price of eggs. A man at the end of the table swears he saw a shooting star the night before, and everyone leans in, hoping for a sign of fortune. Another claims the miller waters his flour, and a debate erupts over the best way to catch him in the act. Laughter flows as freely as the ale, and you realise that this meal, like every meal here, is a way to bind people together. In a world where hunger is always close at hand, sharing a table is an act of trust, a promise that tonight, at least, there is enough for all. The quirkiest tidbit of the night arrives not on a plate, but in a story. A boy, no older than 10, is tasked with turning the spit for the roasting meat, a common job in larger taverns, so common that some inns keep special spit dogs, small dogs trained to run in wheels and turn the spit for hours. Tonight, it's the boy's turn, and he boasts that he can make the roast turn faster than any dog in town. The keeper rolls her eyes, but no one protests as long as the meat doesn't burn. Historians still argue about the origins of spit dogs. Were they a clever medieval invention, or just a myth to amuse children on cold nights? Whatever the truth, the story gets a good laugh, and the boy is promised an extra hunk of bread for his trouble. As the plates are cleared, some by staff, others simply by hungry hands, dessert arrives in the simplest form: fruit if it's in season, or candied nuts passed around in a battered wooden bowl. Honey is the true prize, drizzled over bread or eaten by the sticky fingerful. There's a murmur of appreciation as a pot of stewed pears is set out, and even the most reserved guest can't resist a second helping. Once the eating slows, the table becomes a stage for another medieval ritual: the passing of the salt. Salt is precious, kept in small, lidded pots and guarded fiercely. It's offered to guests as a sign of respect, and refusing it is an insult. Tonight you take a pinch, careful not to spill a grain. The keeper watches, approving, and you sense you've passed some invisible test. With the last bite gone, the laughter resumes. A man leans back, patting his stomach, and declares, "That was nearly fit for a king, if the king likes turnip." Even the keeper laughs, her stern mask cracking for a moment. Stories bloom in the warmth, tales of feasts long past, of bread that never ran out, of a roast goose that supposedly fed an entire village. Some are true, most are wishful thinking, but all are told with the certainty that tonight at least the food was good enough and the company better. By the end of the meal you feel changed, heavier perhaps, but lighter in spirit. The tavern glows with the aftermath of shared fortune, and you find yourself hoping for just one more story, one more song before the night is done. And as you lean back, savouring the taste of bread and ale, you realise the medieval tavern offers more than sustenance. It offers the rarest gift of all, a moment of belonging woven from simple food and the laughter of strangers, in a world where tomorrow's meal is never guaranteed. It doesn't take long for you to realise that in the medieval tavern, drink is not just an accompaniment to food, it's the very heart of the experience, the social oil that keeps every conversation and game in smooth motion. The clatter of mugs, the scent of fermenting grains, the little pools of froth shining in candlelight, these are the true hallmarks of the public house. In a world where water is rarely safe and milk a fleeting luxury, ale, beer, mead and wine rule the table. But these are not the drinks you know. Each cup offers its own story, sometimes a comfort, sometimes a dare. You study your mug, swirling its contents, and realise that medieval ale is a different beast entirely. It's thick, unfiltered, and still alive with the little flecks of yeast and grain that mark it as fresh from the barrel. There's no precise recipe. Each batch depends on the brewer's hand, the weather, and the luck of the yeast. Sometimes it's sharp and grassy, sometimes sour, and always, always a little cloudy. The regulars assure you, with a sly grin, that if you can see the bottom of your mug, you're not drinking real ale. The tavern keeper keeps barrels behind the bar, fat, oaken things banded in iron, each with its own tilt and character. She draws your mug with a steady hand, eyeing the foam. Some nights she'll add a twist of dried fruit or a handful of herbs to the cask just to keep things lively. These small touches are the brewer's signature, and regulars swear by their favourite blends. You notice that the colour of the ale ranges from pale gold to deep brown, sometimes with the faintest shimmer of green if nettles or other herbs have gone into the mix. It's an ever-changing living thing, sometimes robust and warming, other times a little too adventurous for comfort. Next to ale, there's beer, similar but with a sharper bite, brewed with hops or other bitter herbs if they're available. In some towns, hops are rare, and brewers use everything from yarrow to wild rosemary to give their beer character. There's a running debate at your table. Does the bitterness mean it keeps longer, or is it just the mark of a penny-pinching brewer masking off flavours? Historians still argue about when and why hops became common in beer, and tonight the conversation never quite finds a consensus. Every so often someone calls for mead, a honey wine, sweet and golden, reserved for special guests or festive nights. The mead is ladled into cups with reverence, a drink that reminds everyone of summer, of old stories, of ancient feasts. You take a careful sip, tasting wildflowers and distant sun. But even mead can come with a catch. Some batches are so strong they'll curl your toes, and one too many mugs will have you singing louder than you mean to. Wine, too, appears on occasion, though rarely. Imported wine from France or Spain is expensive and saved for nobles or wealthy travellers. More often, you're offered a cup of piment, a rough homemade wine sometimes mixed with honey, herbs or even water to stretch the barrel a little further. You accept, more from curiosity than hope, and find it sharp and a little sour, but with a pleasant, earthy finish. It's a far cry from the wines of kings, but in this smoky hall it fits just right. The strangest drinks, though, are the local brews and concoctions unique to each tavern. Someone produces a clay jug of braggot, a mix of ale and mead, with a kick that leaves your ears ringing. Another regular boasts of his grandmother's herb beer, a secret blend of nettles, dandelion and just a touch of wormwood, which he swears will keep you healthy all winter, and maybe convince you to buy another round. Some of these drinks are barely palatable, but it's the story, not the flavour, that matters. In one famous case, a miracle beer was said to cure heartbreak, at least until you woke the next morning with a splitting headache and no memory of the cure. Not all drinks are for everyone. The keeper keeps a sharp eye out for trouble. She waters down strong brews for younger patrons and steers those already weaving on their stools toward a mug of small ale, a weaker everyday brew that keeps people upright without dulling their wits. Children, too, are given this small ale, believed safer than water. It's a strange sight to modern eyes, a table of red-cheeked children with mugs in hand, giggling at grown-up jokes and snatching bits of cheese from the platter. Historians still debate whether this practice was a necessity or a cultural choice, but tonight, no one seems to think twice. Of course, the drink comes with its own etiquette and dangers. If you spill your ale, you're expected to toast your neighbour for luck. If you finish your mug, it's polite to refill the nearest empty one before your own. On festival nights, this custom can spiral into a blur of generosity, mugs circling the room until even the tavern cat seems tipsy. Every so often, a round of drinking songs breaks out, some bawdy, some sweet, all rising up into the smoky rafters with more enthusiasm than harmony. If you're new, you're expected to sing along by the third chorus, or at least clap in time. A joke floats across the table. Why did the brewer's wife always wear a scarf? To hide the ale stains on her neck. The laughter is easy, the kind that builds on itself, until someone adds a new verse to the song and the whole room joins in. The keeper allows the noise, but only to a point. Too much rowdiness earns a sharp rap on the bar, and everyone quiets in an instant. Here, even laughter has its limits. The tavern's atmosphere changes with each new round. Early in the night the mood is gentle. Stories, soft songs, a slow sipping of warm ale. As the mugs empty and refill, voices grow louder, gestures broader, the fire burning hotter. You watch as a shy apprentice turns bold, challenging his master to an arm wrestling contest after a second mug of braggot. Two women trade stories about a travelling knight who passed through last month, each tale more outrageous than the last. There's a playful competition to see who can invent the wildest, most improbable drinking story. I once drank a whole barrel and woke up in a bishop's bedchamber, and everyone votes with a thump of their mug. The drinks also bring out a certain honesty. Old feuds are mended, old flames rekindled, new alliances quietly forged over shared cups. A merchant who arrived sullen and silent now laughs with the baker, plans made for tomorrow's trade. A farmer who lost his crop this year is handed a mug by the blacksmith who mutters, "Next round's on you when fortune returns." In these small gestures you see the real value of drink in the medieval tavern. It's not the alcohol, but the bond, the warmth, the sense that for one night you're all on the same side. Still, you tread with caution. Every tavern has its stories of the dangers of drink, the guest who vanished after too many mugs, the brawl that started over a spilled cup, the love affair gone sour after a night of too much mead. The keeper's eyes are sharp, her hand quick to intervene. Once, she says, she had to throw out a nobleman's son after he insulted a barmaid. He left with his pride in pieces and his purse a little lighter, she recalls with a grin. Historians still debate how often taverns were sites of real danger versus colourful legend, but the warnings are real enough. You notice another peculiar custom. The taster's toast. When a new barrel is tapped, the first mug is offered to the oldest regular, who takes a careful sip and pronounces judgment. Sometimes it's a poetic review, sweet as summer hay, cloudy as my wife's temper. Other times just a nod or a grimace. If the ale is good, everyone cheers and the keeper beams with pride. If not, she mutters a curse and sets about fixing the brew, adding herbs, a dash of honey, or, in a pinch, a quick prayer to St. Arnold, the patron of brewers. Sometimes guests try to sneak in their own spirits, elicit schnapps from a travelling merchant, or blackjack, a fierce, fiery drink said to be brewed from apples and secrets. The keeper pretends not to see, as long as no trouble follows. But if a guest is caught trying to sell their own brew, they'll find themselves banned for a month, or forced to buy a round for the house as penance. There's even a bit of fringe magic in the world of drinks. Some patrons swear by charms dropped in the bottom of their mugs, a silver coin for luck, a sprig of rosemary to ward off hangovers, a carved bone to catch the evil spirits said to dwell in strong drink. You spot a woman swirling her mug, muttering under her breath before every sip. When you ask, she laughs and says, "The last time I forgot, I spent 3 days in bed. Best not to take chances." Historians still argue whether such beliefs were real superstitions or just clever ways to add drama to the daily cup. By now you've found your favourite, the spiced ale, served warm and fragrant with hints of cinnamon and clove. It's a rare treat, saved for festivals or when a merchant brings a precious pouch of spices from the south. You sip slowly, letting the warmth seep into your bones, and listen as the conversations whirl around you. Someone challenges the table to guess the secret ingredient. Is it ginger? Pepper? No one agrees, but everyone is eager for another round. As the night deepens, the drinks keep coming, but so does the keeper's vigilance. She spaces the rounds, mixes strong with weak, and makes sure no one's cup runs dry, or over. There's a rhythm here, as ancient as the stones beneath your feet. You join in, feeling the warmth and laughter rise in you, until even the hard bench seems comfortable, and the smoky air feels sweet. The drinks here are more than just refreshment. They're history, ritual, and rebellion. Each mug is a story, a link to all the travellers and dreamers who have passed through before you. As you raise your cup for one last toast, you feel the centuries fall away, the worries of tomorrow lost in the warmth of tonight's brew. For a moment, you belong, not just to this tavern, but to the long wild history of those who have laughed, loved, and lived by the flickering firelight, their spirits alive in every dubious, delicious drink. As the evening settles and the tavern's mugs steadily empty and refill, you become aware of a new current humming through the room. The food has softened everyone's edges, and the ale has loosened tongues. Now the true entertainment begins, a spontaneous, irresistible blend of song, story, and rumour, all woven together in the flickering torchlight. This is not just a place to eat and drink. It's the medieval village's living room, its news desk, its theatre and confessional, all rolled into one, echoing with the warmth and mischief of generations. You notice a lull, a hush that spreads across the common room as a bearded man in the far corner stands up and clears his throat. There's a gentle but unmistakable expectation in the air. This is not his first performance. He holds a battered lute, the wood dark and polished by years of wandering. His voice is raspy at first, but as he plucks the strings, the melody smooths out, weaving itself through the room like a soft woolen shawl. He sings of love lost and found, of distant wars, and of a clever fox who tricked a bishop out of his dinner. Every ear leans in, farmhands, travelling merchants, the innkeeper herself, all caught up in the story. The music is contagious. Soon a handful of voices join in, some strong and true, others wavering but enthusiastic. There is a joy in imperfection here, a sense that every voice is welcome, no matter how untrained. The choruses are raucous, shouted with gusto, the verses quieter, almost reverent. It's a communal performance. No stage, no applause at the end, just laughter and a round of drinks for the boldest singer. Between songs, the storytelling begins in earnest. Every table seems to have its own champion raconteur, each one eager to top the last tale. A shepherd boasts of the night he saw 3 witches dancing in the moonlight, only to have a fisherman counter with his own story of a river spirit who granted him a netful of fish, at the price of a single silver coin. There are stories of haunted crossroads, of ghosts seen on the old Roman road, of knights returning from the Crusades with more tales than scars. You realise quickly that history here is a living thing, shaped and reshaped with every telling. One elderly woman, her face lined like a well-used map, tells of a time she nursed a wounded soldier in this very tavern. "He paid me with a silver ring and a promise never to return," she says, brandishing the tarnished ring for all to see. The table leans in, eager to hear every detail, and a younger man jokes, "And did he keep his promise?" She grins, her eyes twinkling. "He did, though his ghost drinks here every winter solstice just to check up on me." A ripple of laughter circles the room. It's not all high drama. There are jokes, dozens of them, traded back and forth like coins. The jests are sometimes clever, sometimes groan-worthy, and almost always at the expense of the local clergy, tax collectors, or rival villages. "Why did the priest refuse a second cup?" one man asks, pausing for effect. "Because he'd already given his confession to the brewer." The laughter is genuine, and you sense that for a few hours at least, everyone in the tavern is on equal footing, free to poke fun at those who rule or tax them outside these walls. Sometimes the gossip takes a sharper turn. In a low voice, a merchant leans across the table and whispers about a neighbour caught watering down his ale. Another shares the latest news from the market. Prices rising, a bandit rumoured on the old road, a nobleman's daughter seen leaving the apothecary's shop in tears. These stories pass quickly, repeated in altered form at every table. By the end of the night, no one quite remembers where the rumours began, but they will travel far beyond these walls, fuel for tomorrow's talk. It's here, in these stories and songs, that the medieval tavern does its most important work. It stitches together the fabric of village life, binding neighbours into something more than just people who share a street or a parish. There are no secrets in a tavern, but there is understanding. A carpenter confesses he's behind on his work, and instead of judgment, receives offers of help and a round of drinks. A young woman announces her engagement and the whole room cheers, someone promising to play at her wedding for only half the usual fee. You marvel at how quickly the boundaries of class and profession blur in this candlelit world. Still, beneath the surface, there is a constant tension, a sense that not every tale is harmless, and not every secret is meant to be shared. Historians still argue whether taverns were hotbeds of sedition, or simply the natural outlet for a world short on privacy. Tonight, you hear a whispered discussion about the king's new taxes, quickly hushed when a stranger draws near. The innkeeper's eyes flick to the table, her face unreadable. She knows when to let gossip flow and when to stem it with a sharp word or a fresh round of ale. A quirky tidbit. In some taverns, a guest who tells the best story of the night is awarded a special token, an old coin, a carved bone, or even a feather stuck in the hat. The winner is expected to defend their title the next evening, and if the story proves particularly outrageous, to buy a round for everyone present. Tonight, a travelling juggler spins a tale of how he once entertained the queen herself, only to be chased out of the palace when he juggled the royal chickens. The audience howls, demanding proof, and he produces a single white feather from his sleeve. Whether true or not, it's enough to earn him the hat feather and a tankard of the finest ale. The music continues, shifting with the mood. Sometimes a slow ballad fills the space, a song about lost love or distant lands. At other times, The tempo quickens and people stamp their feet, clap hands, or, in moments of high spirits, take to dancing in the open spaces between tables. There's no judgment here. The old and young alike join in, laughter rising above the thump of boots on wood. If someone forgets the words, another picks up the tune and the story carries on. Even the tavern animals seem to join in. The cat curls around the minstrel's feet, purring in time with the lute, while the old dog barks along with the rowdiest choruses, tail thumping the rushes. Someone insists the dog can tell when a song is off-key and bets a copper on it. The next tune falters, the dog howls and the table erupts in laughter. But for every light moment there are those of reflection. Someone tells a story of a neighbour lost to illness, and the room grows quiet. Heads bow, mugs are raised in silent tribute. And for a few minutes, everyone remembers the shadows that hang just outside the circle of firelight. Then, almost as if on cue, a new joke starts, a new song rises, and the mood lifts once more. You're pulled into the circle now, encouraged to share a story or song of your own. The pressure is gentle but irresistible. You fumble through a half-remembered riddle, and though you stumble over the punchline, the table rewards you with a cheer and a refill of your mug. Participation, not perfection, is what matters here. A truth that feels surprisingly comforting. Some of the stories wander into the truly bizarre. A merchant claims he once saw a fish that could talk, caught in a storm off the coast of Brittany. The fish, he says, asked to be released in exchange for a single pearl, which he swears he has at home, though no one has ever seen it. Another guest, red-faced from drink, tells of the time he saw St. George himself walking through the town disguised as a beggar. He left me a blessing, the man insists, and a bill for the bread and cheese he ate. The table cackles, and someone suggests that next time he should ask for a miracle with a blessing. You notice that some guests, especially the travellers and minstrels, carry small trinkets or tokens, lucky charms, bits of bone, feathers or stones, said to help with storytelling, singing, or even just keeping the ale flowing. One woman swears her silver thimble keeps her voice clear. A young lad shows off a pebble he claims came from the ruins of Rome itself, and insists it helps him remember every joke he's ever heard. Historians still debate whether such beliefs were taken seriously or were simply part of the fun. The night deepens, and the stories grow wilder, the jokes a bit more raucous, the songs slower and softer. You feel yourself lulled by the rhythm, story, song, laughter, and the gentle clatter of mugs and plates. For all its roughness, the tavern is a place of healing, a place where burdens can be laid down and joys magnified in the company of others. You realise as the fire flickers low that you have become part of this great ongoing story, a single voice added to the chorus of centuries. The old minstrel sings one last song, a lullaby, soft and sweet, about a shepherd finding his way home by the light of a single star. The tavern is quiet now, the energy spent, the crowd content. Mugs are drained, yawns are stifled, and stories drift off, unfinished, waiting for tomorrow night to be picked up again. With the last note lingering in the smoky air, you feel the pull of sleep, the comfort of belonging, and the strange, timeless magic of the medieval tavern. Here, stories are currency, laughter is medicine, and everyone, for one night, finds a place by the fire. Somewhere in the swirl of music and laughter, you start to hear the clatter of dice on wood, and the slap of cards on a rough-hewn table. The evening's energy pivots. Where there was song and story, now there's the thrill of chance, the hungry glint of wager and risk. In a medieval tavern, gambling isn't a side attraction. It's woven into the very spirit of the place, a nightly drama as ancient as the building itself. You make your way closer to the source. Around a battered table, a group has gathered. Farmhands with dirty fingernails, a merchant with rings on his fingers, two travellers whose eyes are sharp and watchful, and a woman in a red scarf who shuffles cards with the easy skill of someone who's seen fortunes turn on a single flick of the wrist. The keeper watches from the bar, eyes narrowed, but doesn't intervene. Here, games of chance are tolerated, even encouraged, so long as no one cheats, no one fights, and the house gets its cut. Tonight, the main attraction is dice, simple cubes carved from bone darkened at the dots, as familiar to these people as bread and ale. A man with a crooked grin shakes the dice in his cupped hands, mumbles a charm to Lady Luck, and lets them tumble across the tabletop. The crowd leans in, breath held, eyes fixed on the rolling cubes. With a groan and a cheer, coins change hands, small fortunes won and lost in moments. You're offered a chance to play. The rules are simple. Bet your coin, guess the outcome, and hope for favour. There's no pretense of fairness. Luck rules here, as capricious as the wind that rattles the tavern windows. You decide to join, heart thumping. The press of the crowd close and electric. The coins you brought clink in your palm, each one feeling both precious and oddly weightless. The game heats up. Someone claims to have the lucky hand, and another scoffs, showing off a battered silver coin he claims once belonged to a bishop and brings luck in every gamble. Except, he adds with a grin, in matters of love. A woman at the table calls for Hazard, a popular medieval dice game, and the rules fly fast. 7 is good, but so is 3, and anything in between is a test of fate. The group teases and taunts, laughter and curses tumbling over each other, but never with true malice. Here, everyone's luck must turn eventually, or so they hope. Cards make an appearance next. They're not the ornate painted decks you might expect, but rough homemade pieces, hand-inked and worn soft at the corners. The game, perhaps Primero or Raffle, is as much about bluffing as about numbers. A young man with nimble fingers fans out his hand and tries to keep a straight face as a merchant narrows his eyes, searching for any tell. The tension rises, a silent battle of wits and nerves. In the end, it's a laugh that breaks the spell. Someone cracks a joke about the loser owing not just coin, but a week's worth of firewood for the tavern hearth. A quirky custom emerges. The unlucky are expected to perform a forfeit, a dance, a song, or, if they're especially unfortunate, to buy a round for the table. Tonight, a red-faced apprentice must stand on a bench and recite a tongue twister, much to the delight of the regulars. The ritual is old, a gentle reminder that luck changes quickly and humiliation is fleeting. In the midst of the games, a whispered story surfaces, a tale of a nobleman who once lost his family estate on a single throw of dice. Some say he still wanders the roads as a beggar, others that he joined a monastery, swearing off chance forever. Historians still argue whether such tales are true or just tavern legends, warnings spun to keep eager hands from wagering away the family cow. As the coins clink and dice roll, you see that these games are about more than money. They're a test of courage, a chance to show off, to flirt, to bond, or to nurse a grudge. Alliances form and dissolve over the course of an hour, a shared wink, a traded coin, a quiet word about someone's unusual luck. Accusations of cheating are serious, but rarely escalate beyond sharp words. The keeper's word is law, one warning, and if it happens again, the cheater is thrown out, sometimes to the jeers of the crowd, sometimes with a silent, angry glare. Some bring their own lucky charms, a feather, a rabbit's paw, a carved bit of wood tucked into a sleeve. One traveller insists on tapping the dice 3 times on the table before every throw, muttering a prayer to St. Cajetan, patron of gamblers. Another scratches a rune onto the tabletop, hoping to curry favour with the fickle gods of fortune. These little rituals are half joke, half hope, but no one dares to roll the dice without them. The stakes rise and fall. Some games are for a single coin, others for promises, splitting tomorrow's chores, or giving up the best seat by the fire for a week. Now and then, you sense an undercurrent of something darker, a wager whispered too quietly, a look that lasts a moment too long. Not all games end in laughter, and you remember hearing that, in some towns, gambling debts have led to fistfights, or even duels at dawn. The keeper's watchful gaze keeps most tempers in check. A joke floats through the crowd. "I'd gamble my last shirt, but it's already been won by the cat." It's met with laughter, a reminder that here, even losses can be softened by humour. The woman in the red scarf tells of a man who bet his boots, lost, and walked home barefoot in the snow. He found better luck the next week. At the cobbler's shop, she says, her eyes twinkling. Meanwhile, side bets and little games spring up at every table. Someone challenges a neighbour to guess the number of peas in a bowl. Another starts a contest to see who can hold a mug steady the longest without spilling a drop. The room is alive with the sound of wagers and wagers settled, fortunes lost and won in a dozen small, forgettable ways. For all its playfulness, gambling serves a deeper purpose. In a world where fate seems uncontrollable, where a bad harvest or sudden sickness can change your life overnight, the chance to risk a little and maybe win is a kind of magic. It's hope, distilled and given shape, even if just for an hour. For a few coins you buy a taste of luck, a brief feeling that the world might tip your way. It's no wonder that dice and cards appear in the oldest medieval art, always with a glint of danger and a sly wink. A scholarly debate has raged for centuries. Were taverns engines of vice, corrupting good folk with games and temptation? Or were they simply safe spaces for letting off steam, their risks outweighed by the bonds and laughs they created? Tonight, you see both sides, a regular who loses a week's wages, red-faced but grinning, and another who, after a lucky streak, slips a coin into the hand of the poorest guest at the bar. Every so often, a new game is invented on the spot. Tonight, someone proposes blind man's bluff with dice, one player blindfolded, the others giving whispered clues or false advice. The game devolves quickly into laughter, as the blindfolded man, trusting in luck and friendship, tries to guess the numbers. It's a silly, fleeting distraction, but it leaves the whole table lighter, worries set aside for another night. A travelling minstrel, perhaps emboldened by luck, strikes up a song about famous losers and legendary winners, his voice rising above the din. The chorus is simple: fortune turns, fortune burns, and the crowd shouts along, mugs waving in the firelight. You join in, swept up in the easy fellowship of the moment. When someone finally runs out of coin, a new tradition takes hold: the tavern trust, a regular vouchers for the shortfall, a promise to cover debts until next week's wages. It's an honour system, not written down but deeply felt. To break tavern trust is to be cast out, and in a world where loneliness is the worst punishment, no one takes the risk lightly. Night deepens, the fire in the hearth burns low, the game's slow, and tired laughter drifts toward the rafters. Someone counts their winnings, another counts their losses, and both seem equally content. In the medieval tavern, the real prize isn't coins or promises, but the stories you'll tell in the morning, the friendships strengthened by shared fortune and misfortune. Before you leave the table, you're drawn into one last wager, a test of riddles, the loser owing a song at tomorrow's supper. You agree, half hoping to win, half delighted at the thought of returning to this circle of luck and laughter. As you rise, you notice that even the keeper relaxes, her stern gaze softening as the games wind down. The coins and cards are swept away, debts tallied and forgiven, and the table clears for the next part of the night's adventure. Here in the heart of the medieval tavern, you've seen fortune at its rawest, generous, fickle, and never far from laughter. With a few coins lighter and your heart lighter still, you step back into the warm embrace of the crowd, ready for whatever stories or secrets the night will bring next. The games wind down, laughter still echoing around the rafters, and you find yourself observing the rhythm of the innkeeper's world. In the flicker of firelight, the innkeeper, sometimes a woman, sometimes a man, sometimes a whole family, moves through the crowd with practiced grace. Hospitality in a medieval tavern or inn is a complicated, sacred dance, equal parts business, tradition, and instinct, a performance that must satisfy not just the guests but the invisible, ever-present laws of the road. You study the keeper as she works, noting the constant calculation behind her eyes. She is the ruler of this small kingdom, watching everything with sharp intuition. Her arms are strong from years of hauling barrels and sweeping ashes, her face open yet guarded, quick to smile but quicker still to frown if rules are broken. She remembers the regulars' names and, more importantly, their stories. The birth of a child, the death of a parent, a lost cow or a found coin. She is gossip's gatekeeper, news's anchor, and, when need arises, the voice of authority that can hush a room with a single look. You watch as a group of travellers enters, dust on their cloaks and a cautious hope in their eyes. The innkeeper greets them, not with a smile, but with a question. Where are you bound, and who sent you? It's a ritual, this first exchange, and only after a few words, a mutual weighing of character, does she wave them in. To those too bold, she's cold. To those too meek, she offers gentle reassurance. She finds a balance, always, welcoming guests but never promising more than the inn can offer. A history fact floats to your mind. Medieval innkeepers were licensed and regulated in many towns, their right to trade a privilege not lightly granted. They paid fees, answered to local guilds, and were expected to provide safe haven to honest travellers, but also to report anything suspicious. Some were agents of the law, others spies for local lords, all carrying out the delicate work of balancing hospitality with vigilance. Historians still argue how much power innkeepers truly held. Some claim they were the secret eyes and ears of the village, while others say their influence ended at the tavern door. Tonight, you see evidence for both. The keeper moves through the crowd, her hands never idle. She checks the fire, stirs the soup, wipes a table, and with a brief glance signals her helpers to fetch more ale or bread. She directs the young potboy, scolds the maid for dawdling, and always keeps half an eye on the guests. If a fight is brewing, she's there before tempers boil. If a guest looks pale, she produces a mug of watered wine and a crust of bread, pressing it into their hand with a wordless kindness. Hospitality is not just service, it's art, ritual, and even a kind of game. There are rules, and they vary from place to place. In some inns, a guest is offered water to wash their hands, a ritual sign of welcome. In others, it's a chunk of fresh bread, broken and shared with the host before any money changes hands. You notice the little gestures. A nod, a touch on the arm, a question about the journey. The keeper listens carefully, always judging what each guest needs. A merchant might want news of the road, a farmer might crave quiet, a group of pilgrims may need a prayer and a candle for the night. There's a subtle dance when it comes to seating as well. Regulars are given their favoured spots, but newcomers, especially those who look wealthy or tired, are guided gently toward the fire or nearest to the kitchen, where the innkeeper can keep watch. Sometimes a room is found for a guest who seems troubled, even if it means another must give up their place. The innkeeper's decisions are final. Protest too much, and you might find yourself asked to try your luck elsewhere. You overhear the innkeeper negotiating a dispute over a room. 2 travellers have claimed it, each insisting on their right. She listens, arms folded, and then rules in favour of the older, frailer guest, but smooths the situation by offering the other a free mug of mead and a spot in the main hall near the hearth. There's a round of applause for her decision, and, as if on cue, the crowd's mood lightens again. It's an old trick. In the world of the medieval inn, fairness is never just about rules, but about keeping the peace and making sure everyone has a place. A quirky tidbit emerges from the shadows. One wall in the inn is covered in scraps of parchment and bits of charcoal drawing. Some are messages. Tell Peter I made it safe to York. Miller John still owes me a pig. Others, crude jokes or sketches of past guests. In some places, innkeepers kept a guest book of sorts, a log of who came and went, sometimes with little notes about behaviour or special requests. In this inn, it's a communal canvas, updated nightly, a living memory that all guests contribute to, one mark at a time. In the lulls between service, the keeper shares a story with a group of tired travellers. She tells of the year when a wandering monk arrived, penniless and ill. The inn had little to offer but bread and shelter, yet that monk blessed the hearth, and ever since no fire here has ever gone out before dawn. Some call it luck, she says, but I call it the work of honest hands and a watchful eye. Historians still argue whether such blessings had any practical effect or were simply a way to explain good fortune. but the story is accepted with a round of grateful nods. You're drawn into the quiet acts of care that shape the innkeeper's work. She checks the windows for drafts, adds a fresh log to the fire, sets out bowls of stew for the latecomers, and gently turns away those who are too drunk or too poor to pay. Though you notice, often enough, she finds a way to slip a bit of bread or a mug of small ale to those in real need. Reputation matters. A generous innkeeper draws loyalty, and loyalty keeps a business alive through famine or plague. Children of the inn dart between tables carrying messages or mugs, learning the rhythms of hospitality from a young age. You see the pride in their faces as they refill a mug or clear a plate, the quick glance to the keeper for approval. It's a family business in the truest sense, and everyone, guests included, plays their part. As the hour grows late, you sense the keeper's subtle shift from host to guardian. Doors are barred against the night, shutters closed, valuables discreetly collected and stored. Guests are quietly warned to keep an eye on their purses and not to leave anything precious unattended. In the medieval world, safety is never taken for granted, and an inn that cannot guarantee a guest's security will not last long. You hear whispers of other places less reputable, where travellers have vanished, never seen again. Here, though, the keeper's word is her bond so long as you keep yours. A guest, slightly drunk, tries to pick a quarrel with another over a misheard word. The innkeeper is there in a moment, her hand on his shoulder, her voice low and firm. You'll take your anger outside or leave it behind, friend. Here, the night is for peace. The man mutters, abashed, and sits back down, the spell of tension broken. There is a kind of magic in this, you realise, a power that comes not from size or strength, but from the trust of the room. You listen as the regulars praise the innkeeper's skill at reading the room. It's said she can sense trouble before it starts, and more than one fight has been stopped before the first fist flew. Some say it's a sixth sense, others just experience, but all agree it's what sets the best innkeepers apart from the rest. Hospitality extends to the little comforts too. Clean rushes are spread on the floor, fresh straw stuffed into mattresses, and the scent of herbs, lavender, sage, sometimes rosemary, drifts through the air, meant to calm guests and ward off the pests. Bowls of warm water for washing are set by the fire, and a ragged towel is offered to anyone whose hands show the grime of the road. Candles are replaced as they burn low, and a careful watch is kept for anyone who might stumble and fall. The keeper ensures that, if only for a night, everyone feels cared for. Yet for all the kindness, boundaries remain. Credit is not easily given. A guest who can't pay is watched closely, and there is little patience for those who try to take advantage. In the stories of the road, you've heard of innkeepers who forgave debts out of charity, only to find themselves bankrupt and their own families hungry. Here, generosity is measured. Enough to show compassion, not so much as to risk the business. It's a lesson learned the hard way, passed down from parent to child, carved into every beam and brick. As the night deepens, a hush falls. The innkeeper makes a final round, checking that every door is bolted, every candle extinguished but one, the watch candle, left burning by the hearth to comfort those who wake in the dark. She wishes the room good night, her voice soft but firm, and the guests settle into the lull of quiet conversation or gentle sleep. Tonight, you've seen hospitality at its most intricate, layered with tradition, sharpened by necessity, made human by the small daily acts of care and courage. The medieval innkeeper is part host, part judge, part mother or father to a whole roomful of strangers. Their art is invisible, but unmistakable, and for one night you are safe, warm, and grateful to have found shelter beneath their watchful gaze. As the tavern's main room quiets, bellies full, dice and cards stowed, and even the boldest songs trailing off into soft hums, the reality of sleep emerges. In a medieval inn, the day's adventures may end, but the real challenge begins, finding rest among strangers. You're led, along with a few other travellers, through a low door into the sleeping quarters, a shadowy upper room or cramped loft, depending on the inn's size and the night's fortune. You half expect privacy, but those hopes vanish as quickly as your first mug of ale. Beds, such as they are communal and close-packed. Sometimes they're little more than piles of straw or shared mattresses laid across planks. In many inns, one great bed, the host's bed, is claimed by a half-dozen guests, sometimes more, all in varying states of wakefulness and wine-soaked relaxation. Only the wealthiest, or those lucky enough to arrive early, might secure a narrow cot or a mattress to themselves. Tonight, you're assigned places somewhere in the middle. A straw mattress that's been well used, with sheets clean but worn. You settle in, your boots tucked beneath your head for safekeeping, and survey your sleeping companions. A weary peddler clutching his pack, a pair of farmhands snoring in harmony, a merchant already wrapped in his cloak, and a young woman whose eyes dart nervously around the room, as if counting exits and shadows alike. The first awkwardness is physical. Elbows, knees, and the odd flailing foot jostle for space in the crowded gloom. You adjust, find a corner of straw that isn't too lumpy, and try to carve out a sliver of comfort. There's no escaping the sounds. Someone coughs, another mutters in his sleep, a dog barks outside, and somewhere, beneath it all, the steady creak of the inn's ancient timbers. This is no romantic fantasy. It's practical, necessary, and sometimes deeply uncomfortable. But even here, the customs and rules of medieval hospitality persist. You quickly learn not to ask too many questions or pry into the business of your bedfellows. Conversation, if it happens at all, is hushed. Words exchanged about the day's journey, the weather, or a warning about keeping purses close. Someone always volunteers to sleep nearest the door, whether out of bravery or simple habit, while others cluster near the wall or the fire if there is one. A few quick jokes about snoring and stolen blankets break the ice. Everyone knows tonight will be a tangle of limbs and interrupted dreams, so better to laugh about it now. There's an art to sleeping among strangers. You keep your valuables tucked tight and your boots in reach, wary of the rare but real risk of theft. Most travellers are honest, out of necessity if not virtue, but the stories of lost purses and vanished rings echo through every inn. The innkeeper, you note, makes a last round before retiring, peering into the corners, counting heads, and making sure no one who shouldn't be here has slipped in. Her presence is a silent reassurance, a promise that, at least for tonight, you are as safe as you can be. A quirky tidbit makes the rounds before sleep. It's said that in some towns, the best inns offer a charm, perhaps a sprig of yarrow, a small wax seal, or a scrap of parchment with a prayer, to those nervous about bad dreams or wicked spirits. Some swear by the witch's ladder, a braided cord hung above the bed to tangle any nightmare that tries to enter. Tonight you spot a guest tying a bit of string around the bedpost, muttering something about warding off the creeping dread. Historians still debate the origins and effectiveness of these charms. Were they sincere protection, or simply another tradition to help uneasy travellers sleep? Either way, you decide it can't hurt to slip your own coin beneath your pillow. The inn's architecture doesn't help much with privacy or peace. Walls, if there are any, are thin, wattle and daub at best, thick curtains at worst. Floorboards creak, voices carry, and the smells of smoke, sweat, and yesterday's stew linger in the air. Some inns have a communal fireplace burning all night, others rely on the body heat of the sleepers. Every so often someone rises, perhaps to check a horse, perhaps to answer nature's call. The door groans, cold air slips in, and everyone shuffles deeper beneath their blankets. If you're fortunate, the bedbugs and fleas are fewer here than in the worst establishments. Some inns pride themselves on clean straw, changed every few weeks and sprinkled with dried herbs to deter pests. In others, the scratching begins the moment you lay down. Tonight you're lucky. There's little more than the usual itch, and the merchant next to you mutters a blessing to St. Macarius, patron of good sleep, before settling in with a contented sigh. Conversation, if it continues, turns confessional. Night-time in a shared bed brings out secrets, stories of lost loves, hopes for the morrow, confessions of fear or guilt. You listen as the peddler beside you whispers about a quarrel with his brother, how he hopes to make peace by the next harvest. The young woman shares a quick prayer for her family, and the farmhands swap rumours of haunted crossroads. In these moments the crowded room feels strangely intimate, a fellowship born of necessity and made gentle by the darkness. Historians still argue about the realities of medieval sleep. Was it restful or restless? Did people truly sleep through the night, or was rest broken into shifts as some old texts suggest? Tonight, you experience a little of both. Your dreams come in fits and starts, sometimes vivid, sometimes lost in the muddle of distant footsteps and shifting bodies. When you wake, it's to the rustle of someone stoking the embers or the soft footfall of the innkeeper checking the door. A joke floats through the darkness. If you wake with all your teeth and both boots, you've had a good night. It gets a few muffled laughs, and you tuck your boots tighter, just in case. Not every guest is comfortable with the arrangement. The merchant, unused to such close quarters, spends a while fidgeting and sighing, eventually surrendering to sleep only when exhaustion wins out. The farmhands, by contrast, are asleep almost instantly, accustomed to the communal living of rural cottages and field camps. The young woman keeps her purse close, but eventually her breathing evens out, calm at last. You notice the subtle rituals that mark the transition to sleep. Prayers murmured to favourite saints, charms tucked under pillows, a careful laying out of tomorrow's clothes for quick escape at dawn. Some guests sleep in their day clothes, too wary of theft or too cold to undress. Others, especially those here for several nights, make a show of removing boots and belt, trusting in the inn's reputation. The dogs, if there are any, curl up at the feet of the beds, guarding their humans and, perhaps, soaking up the stray warmth. The cat, having made her rounds of the tavern, hops up to claim a spot by the warmest sleeper. It's a strangely comforting presence, the quiet breathing of animals mixed with the human chorus, a reminder that safety is always a shared thing, never solitary. If you're very unlucky, you might share your sleep with a snorer of legendary skill. Tonight, the peddler proves to be a champion, his rhythmic buzz a background to every other sound. Someone tosses a bit of straw at him, and a half-hearted attempt to roll him over is met with failure and resigned laughter. There's no cure for a snorer, only patience. For all its discomforts, there's a strange peace in communal sleep. The rhythms of breath, the shifting of bodies, the shared warmth, all combine to make the space feel less lonely. You're reminded that for most of history, solitude was a luxury, and company, even noisy, restless company, was the price paid for safety. As dawn nears, sleep grows lighter. The first travellers to rise are those with the longest roads ahead. They dress quickly, moving quietly to avoid waking others, and slip out with soft words of thanks to the innkeeper. The merchant is gone before full light, his boots barely scuffing the floor. The farmhands stretch and yawn, exchanging sleepy greetings, while the young woman takes a moment by the hearth to whisper another prayer. You rise, stretch, and gather your things, boots thankfully still beneath your head. The innkeeper appears with a jug of water and a loaf of bread. Simple, but welcome. You exchange a few quiet words, thanking her for the shelter, and she nods, her eyes already moving to the next guest in need. As you step back into the main room, you notice that some guests are just now coming to bed. The night watchmen, the late gamblers, the ones who lingered by the dying fire, reluctant to let the warmth of the night's company fade. You give them a sleepy nod, a final smile, and take a last look at the crowded sleeping quarters. For all its noise, for all its discomfort, you realise you'll remember this night long after softer beds and quieter inns have faded from memory. A final, gentle debate drifts between two elderly guests as the sun rises. Is it better to sleep among strangers, or alone in the wild? Neither can decide, but both agree that for tonight at least the company was worth the sacrifice of comfort. And so, blinking in the grey light of morning, you move forward. One more traveller among many, one more story folded into the long tangled dream of medieval inns. The pale light of early morning creeps through the cracks in the shutters, washing the tavern's rafters and benches in a soft grey. Sleep lifts slowly, like a heavy woolen blanket from the faces of your fellow travellers. You stretch on your straw pallet, boots still safely by your head, as the sounds of waking ripple across the room. Groans, yawns, the creak of floorboards, and the muted shuffle of tired feet. In the world of medieval inns, daybreak comes quietly, yet it always brings the promise of new tales. Before the night's spell breaks completely, you find yourself drawn into the oldest ritual of all, the sharing of stories among travellers at dawn. The main room of the inn glows with the last embers of last night's fire. Mugs are refilled with small ale or watered wine, and bread is passed around, sometimes with a smear of cold butter or a bite of sharp cheese. There's no rush. The world outside can wait a moment longer while you savour the gentle magic of communal waking. At your table, the mood is gentle, contemplative. The boisterousness of the previous evening has faded into something softer, a camaraderie built not on games or ale, but on shared fatigue and the relief of another night safely passed. The peddler, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, tells a half-remembered dream about a gold coin and a talking horse. It earns a sleepy chuckle, and someone jokes that dreams in the inn are never to be trusted, not after so much stew and ale. You sip your morning drink and feel a thread of connection. These are strangers, but for a few precious hours you've all been part of the same small world. One traveller, a grey-bearded merchant with a battered hat, leans forward to begin a tale. His voice is quiet, but everyone listens. When I was young, I travelled with a caravan across the Alps. We stopped at an inn so high up that you could see stars even at dawn. That night an old woman shared our fire. She told me stories of her village, lost to an avalanche, and how the ghosts of her family guided her across the pass each winter. I didn't believe in ghosts then, but now, well. He shrugs, and the group nods in understanding. Historians still argue whether such tales were memory, invention, or the inevitable mixing of both, but in the hush of morning, truth and myth are twins. The young woman from your sleeping quarters shares her own story, a tale of fleeing famine in her home village, of walking for weeks with nothing but a crust of bread, and of the kindness she found at a nameless roadside inn. I remember the fire and the way the innkeeper gave me her own blanket, she says. That night, I learned that even a stranger's table can feel like home. Her voice is soft but steady, and others offer nods and murmurs of comfort. A quirky tradition emerges. Travellers compete to see who can tell the tallest, most unbelievable tale. One man claims to have seen the king's falcon fly to Rome and return with a gold ring. A woman insists she once sold a cartful of rotten apples to a bishop, who declared them the sweetest he'd ever tasted. The prize for the best story is nothing more than the last slice of bread and a promise to carry the story to the next town. The laughter is easy, sleepy and gentle. No one is trying to outdo anyone else, only to entertain and remember. These morning tales serve a deeper purpose. For many the road is uncertain, filled with dangers and hardships. To gather around a common table, to hear that others have travelled, struggled and survived. This is comfort, encouragement, even a form of hope. You find yourself sharing a little of your own journey, the roads you've walked, the strange inns you've seen. There's a hush as you speak, and when you finish, a murmur of approval, an invitation to stay in their company a little longer. Through all this, the innkeeper moves quietly, refilling mugs, clearing plates, listening with half an ear. She never interrupts, but when someone falters in their telling, she's quick to offer a word of encouragement or a gentle prod to continue. She's heard 1,000 stories, you sense, and she values each one, not for the truth it holds, but for the way it weaves travellers together. A new face appears, a man who arrived late in the night, his clothes still damp from the road. He has the wide-eyed look of someone not used to company, but when pressed, he shares a strange tale, the dream of a black dog leading him through a forest, always just out of reach. Someone laughs and says it must be an omen, and another insists he leave a scrap of bread by the door for luck. Historians still debate the meaning of such dreams and omens, but for now, it's enough to marvel and tease. You notice that each story, even the smallest, is met with respect. No one laughs too hard. No one scoffs at the wildest claims. There's a tacit understanding here that on the road, anything is possible, and that last night's stranger is this morning's fellow traveller. The lines between fact and fiction blur, and the important thing is not the details, but the sharing itself. In some inns, the morning storytelling becomes almost ceremonial. The oldest guest is asked to offer a blessing, or perhaps a proverb. "May your roads be smooth, your purse full, and your stories worth the telling," says the pedlar, raising his mug in a toast. Others echo the sentiment, and for a moment the inn feels sacred, a chapel of shared fortune. A quirky tidbit. In certain regions, it's customary to exchange tokens, pebbles, bits of ribbon, or even a single feather, as a way of marking the telling of a good tale. The young woman gives you a sprig of dried lavender, for safe travels and sweet dreams, she says. You tuck it into your pouch, already treasuring it as a souvenir of this fleeting fellowship. The conversation shifts to news of the world beyond the inn. A merchant speaks of markets in distant towns, another of bandits seen on the road. Rumours of plague and war drift through the talk, but so do happier reports. A new baby in a neighbouring village, a harvest festival planned for next week. News is currency in the medieval world, and the morning gathering at the inn is its exchange, a time to learn, to warn, to hope. You're reminded that, for all its hardships, travel in the Middle Ages is a communal act. No one survives alone for long, and the inns and taverns that dot the countryside are lifelines as much as shelters. The stories you hear here will follow you down the road, grow and change, become part of the great shifting tapestry of medieval memory. A debate starts. What's the strangest thing you've ever carried across the kingdom? The answers range from a sack of frogs for a bishop's feast, to a letter written in invisible ink, to a tiny casket that, according to its carrier, contained nothing but a single hair from a saint. The merchant laughs, insisting nothing is stranger than his own battered boots, which he claims have walked the length of England and France and never once failed him. The laughter is infectious, the stories wild and impossible, yet utterly believable in the dawn light. By now the inn is fully awake. Some travellers begin to pack their bags, check their horses, count their coins. Farewells are exchanged, promises made to meet again, though everyone knows the odds of crossing paths twice as slim. The innkeeper wishes each guest safe travels, sometimes with a blessing, sometimes with a sly warning to watch out for the black dog on the forest road. You take your leave, the lavender sprig tucked safely away, and step into the fresh air of the new day. As you walk away from the inn, the stories follow you. They cling like the morning mist, little echoes of laughter, fear, hope, and memory. You realise, with a bittersweet pang, that these brief moments of community are as essential as food or shelter, medicine for the loneliness that haunts every journey. You vow to carry the stories forward, to share them at the next fire, the next table, the next circle of strangers turned friends. If morning in a medieval inn is marked by stories and farewells, it's also a quiet confrontation with reality. The standards of comfort and cleanliness here are nothing like the sanitized world you may be used to. As the sleepy magic of dawn fades, the tavern's main room fills with the unmistakable smells of the previous night. Spilled ale, old smoke, sweat, and the earthy tang of bodies pressed together in laughter and sleep. The new day reveals the medieval public house as it really is, alive, bustling, but undeniably rough around the edges. You stand, stretching the night's stiffness from your limbs, and your feet remind you that the rushes or straw on the floor, meant to soak up mess, have not been changed in weeks. A quick glance confirms what your nose already knew. Last night's spills, bits of food, and perhaps even the occasional accident have all vanished into the soft, crackling floor covering. A hound nosing through the rushes emerges triumphant with a crust of bread. A cat bats at something invisible, perhaps a beetle or more likely a flea. Historians still argue whether medieval inns were dirtier than the average home, or simply exposed their mess to more eyes. But either way, hygiene is more a hope than a guarantee. A communal basin stands by the hearth, where guests are invited to wash hands and faces. The water is grey and tepid by now, and the scrap of linen meant for drying is damp. Its cleanliness long surrendered to duty. You follow the custom, splashing your face and hoping the act will drive off sleep's last clinging threads. A barmaid refills the basin from a bucket drawn from the well. Fresh enough, but not without its own risks, as everyone knows that well water is sometimes more trouble than it's worth. A quick tidbit surfaces in your mind. Some inns in larger towns are proud of their clean rooms or pure water, advertising them with wooden signs. In reality, the difference is often only in the frequency of the straw's replacement or the vigour of the weekly sweep. A few places go further, burning aromatic herbs, sage, rosemary or lavender, to mask the smell and, it's hoped, chase away disease. Tonight's innkeeper makes a show of tossing a handful of dried mint onto the hearth, and the room briefly fills with a sweet medicinal haze. You notice, too, the ritual of cleaning the tables and benches. Out comes a rough cloth, sometimes little more than an old rag, and the surface is wiped with brisk circular motions. This, too, is a performance as much as a genuine cleaning. The crumbs and stickiness are spread, not banished, and the cracks in the wood hold stories of hundreds of meals. Still, there is comfort in the ritual, the sense that, for a moment, order has returned before the day's new chaos begins. Personal cleanliness is a privilege few possess. Most guests are grateful for a mug of water to rinse their mouths, and a comb or cloth to smooth their hair. Bathing, in the modern sense, is rare. Hot water is reserved for the ill, the wealthy, or the truly desperate. Soap is a luxury. When it appears, it's often made of lye and animal fat, more harsh than fragrant. Some inns keep a battered tub in the yard for travellers willing to pay extra, but privacy is as rare as the hot water itself. You catch the low voices of regulars trading tips about avoiding lice or fleas. Keep your cloak wrapped tight, one advises, and always check the seams. Another swears by sprinkling salt along the mattress. A third by carrying a bit of wormwood in your pocket. The peddler who slept beside you last night is shaking out his blanket in the early sun, eyes narrowed for the telltale signs of unwanted guests. In the medieval world, the best defence against pests is vigilance and, when possible, a little good luck. At breakfast, the reality of medieval sustenance becomes clear. The fare is plain but filling. Fresh bread if the baker has delivered, or toasted remnants from the night before. A pot of porridge simmers over the hearth, laced with a hint of honey or, if times are lean, nothing more than salt and onions. Sometimes a lucky traveller can buy an egg, a slice of cold meat, or a chunk of cheese. More often, it's whatever can be spared from yesterday's leftovers. The innkeeper moves among the guests, offering mugs of small ale, safe to drink if weak enough for children, and a kind word to those heading out early. She cracks jokes about the snoring last night, winks at the merchant whose boots are now suspiciously clean, the work you suspect of an enterprising potboy in search of a tip, and gives a gentle warning to a guest who lingers too long at the wash basin. As the morning light grows stronger, you become aware of the quiet but constant labour that keeps the inn alive. A maid sweeps the floor, gathering the worst of the night's debris into a heap to be tossed outside. The kitchen smells of boiling porridge, smoke, and the faint sweetness of apples stewing in a pot. Outside, the yard bustles as stable boys feed horses, brush their coats, and scrape out stalls. A merchant bickers good-naturedly with the ostler over the price of oats, while a young traveller tries to coax his mule into accepting a bridle. You wander through the yard, the sharp scents of animals and earth mixing with the cool morning air. In some inns, animals sleep in the same building as the guests, sometimes even in the same room. Tonight's inn, a little better appointed, keeps horses, mules and chickens in a separate stable. The noise and the smells are still close, a reminder that in medieval life there's little space between human and animal, between work and rest. A fringe tidbit. Some travellers keep a clove of garlic or a small charm tied to their saddles to keep the fever at bay. Others trust in a brisk morning walk and a good sweat to drive out any ill humour from the night before. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were rooted in genuine folk medicine, or simply the desperate hope to ward off the next wave of illness. Even with these daily discomforts, the inn is full of life. Local villagers drift in for news or a quick mug of ale, and the conversations that began at dawn continue over breakfast. Children run underfoot, dodging brooms and laughing as they beg for scraps from the kitchen. A dog sleeps by the hearth, twitching in a dream of last night's feast. The cat, now full from her night's hunting, curls up on a windowsill to wash her paws in the sun. The innkeeper, ever alert, checks every corner, her eyes always on the lookout for spilled drink, a loose stone, or a guest in need of an extra bite. She offers advice to travellers heading out, which roads are safe, which are best avoided, where the next inn lies a day's journey away. She warns of rumours, a pickpocket seen in the market, a band of soldiers camped outside the next village, a new toll levied on the old bridge. These details are more than idle gossip. They are survival tools, the information network of a world where every journey holds 100 hidden risks. By late morning, the tavern is transformed. The rush of the night has faded. The tables are mostly clear, the air a little fresher. A few stragglers remain, nursing mugs and making plans. The potboy hauls a bucket of water across the floor, splashing more than he mops, but at least the worst of the night's filth is banished. You linger by the door, savouring a last look at the place. The hearth, the benches, the beams darkened by years of smoke and laughter. A scholarly debate remains unresolved. Did medieval people mind the filth, or was it simply accepted as the price of communal life? Some accounts describe travellers complaining bitterly about bedbugs, sour ale or stale bread. Others suggest a kind of resignation, a sense that dirt was inevitable and even a mark of hard work. Tonight, you've seen a little of both. Grumbling, laughter, and a shared effort to keep chaos at bay, if only until the next night falls. Before you go, the innkeeper presses a small battered token into your hand. A flat stone, warm from her pocket. "For luck," she says, and you nod, grateful for her kindness. You realise that, for all its discomforts, the medieval inn is as much a refuge as it is a challenge. A place where life, in all its messy, noisy, joyful reality, is lived together, and where the small acts of care, however imperfect, mean more than any polished floor or pristine sheet. You step into the sunlight, the sounds of the inn fading behind you. Ahead, the road beckons, uncertain and wild, but you carry with you the memory of shared meals, shared laughter, and the daily, ordinary heroism of people who find ways to make a home in even the roughest places. You leave the morning bustle behind, but the memory of last night's inn lingers like a glow in your chest. It's only as dusk returns and the tavern lamps are relit that you realise another side of these places, one that wakes only when most honest folk are home and the world outside grows uncertain. This is when the back rooms come to life, the private nooks and shadowed corners. The medieval tavern is not only a public meeting ground, it is also the discreet stage for secret business, midnight plots, and alliances forged in whispers. You sense it almost immediately. A group of men crowding a table near the kitchen, heads close, voices low. They're not just swapping stories about the harvest. You recognise a few, a local reeve, a well-dressed merchant and a priest with travel mud still drying on his boots. Their faces are closed, laughter strained. You catch fragments of talk, taxes, a new levy, something about a missing cart of wool. The innkeeper glances their way, then looks back at you, her eyes warning. Don't pry, not tonight. The inn's main room has shifted as well. There's music still, but it's softer now, the melodies played for themselves rather than the crowd. Some guests sit apart, nursing mugs and staring into the fire. A travelling scholar unrolls a scroll, scratching notes in the dim light. Two young men, faces flushed with more than drink, play dice in a side alcove, whispering between each throw. The easy camaraderie of the day has been replaced by something denser, charged with possibility and risk. A back door creaks. The innkeeper disappears into the shadows, returning moments later with a tray of bread and wine. She moves quietly, efficiently, her face unreadable. You wonder what she knows and what she chooses not to see. In medieval towns, a wise innkeeper learned the art of discretion. She could not risk angering the local lord or the town watch, but she also knew that her livelihood depended on her tavern being a safe haven for all sorts. It's a delicate balance. Listen enough to keep danger at bay, but not so much as to become a target yourself. Your seat gives you a view of the room's strange choreography. A merchant and a farmer huddle over a crude map, trading information about prices and road conditions. Two men in faded livery quietly discuss which lord they serve, their loyalties hedged by circumstance and opportunity. In a far corner, a hooded figure, silent all evening, passes a folded slip of parchment to a pale, anxious apprentice. The apprentice tucks it away without a word, vanishing out the back moments later. The message's contents are a mystery, but you see the ripple of attention it causes. A nervous glance, a brief silence, then the resumption of normal conversation, slightly louder than before. Rumours of secret societies and outlaw bands swirl through the medieval imagination. In some places, the tavern is believed to be the headquarters of the local thieves' guild. In others, a gathering place for heretics or rebels. Sometimes it's true. More often, the reality is simpler. People conducting private business in a place where strangers' eyes can be trusted not to linger. Still, the innkeeper takes no chances. A trusted regular stands near the door, and when a pair of unknown men tries to slip inside, he blocks their way with a friendly but firm word. A quirky tidbit. In some towns, it's said that a tavern with a red lantern outside is a signal for those seeking secret company, be it romance, business, or something less savoury. Tonight, no lantern hangs, but the sense of invitation is palpable. A subtle promise that if you know how to ask, you'll find what you're looking for. Tonight's music is different too. The old bard plucks a haunting tune, the kind that sets nerves on edge. A woman sings softly in a dialect you barely recognise. A lullaby, perhaps, or a warning. At the centre of the room, a game of chess has begun, the pieces carved from bone and horn. Each move is slow, deliberate, and you sense that the game is as much about signalling intent as winning. The men playing exchange quiet words, and once, when a night falls, both look up at the door as if expecting someone. You catch the innkeeper's eye and, emboldened by curiosity, ask if the back room is available for a private conversation. She hesitates, then nods, leading you down a narrow corridor past storage casks and bundles of herbs. The room is small, bare except for a battered table, 2 stools, and a window just large enough for moonlight. Here, secrets are traded, deals struck, and sometimes confessions offered. She closes the door behind you with a wordless understanding. If you need anything, just knock, she says, her voice gentle but firm. Privacy, after all, is the most precious service an inn can offer. As you sit, you remember that many of the greatest dramas of the age unfolded in places just like this. Kings planned campaigns, merchants plotted fortunes, lovers wrote their names in dust on the tabletop. The world outside was unpredictable, but within these thick stone walls the future could be shaped, if only for a moment, by the right words, the right deal, the right secret whispered at the right time. Historians still argue, did these secret meetings change the course of history, or were they only ripples in the vast sea of everyday life? Did the peasants' revolts, the guild uprisings, the great betrayals of lords and kings all begin with a mug of ale in a low-lit tavern? Tonight you sense the truth is both more and less than legend. The most important decisions are sometimes made in public, sometimes in private, but always with a measure of risk and trust. The night grows later, the shadows deeper. In the corner, the dice game has shifted to quiet negotiation. A debt to be settled, a future favour promised. At the bar, the innkeeper listens as a traveller confides the rumour of an impending war. She hears him out, offers him a room, but the information, you suspect, will soon make its way to the town watch or the local lord. Knowledge, in the medieval world, is as valuable as gold and just as dangerous. A sudden hush falls. A group of cloaked figures enters, faces shadowed, their presence immediately felt. The regulars tense, but the innkeeper greets them with a nod. They take a table by the window, speaking only in low-clipped tones. You sense this is not their first secret meeting, nor will it be their last. Some guests excuse themselves, retiring early rather than risk being drawn into whatever business is afoot. A joke passes among the braver souls at the bar. If you want to hear a secret, just pour another round and wait for the room to empty. The laughter is nervous, but the tension lifts. Someone orders more ale and the conversation shifts back to safer ground. Crops, the weather, a stray dog seen outside the churchyard. But for those who remain, the night offers its own kind of fellowship. You find yourself listening to a farmer recount his family's escape from bandits last winter, and a merchant quietly reveals his plan to leave town before the new tax collectors arrive. Each story, each confidence, is both shield and weapon, a way to survive in a world where trust is rare and loyalty rarer still. Before you leave the back room, the innkeeper returns. She gives you a knowing look and quietly asks if all is well. You thank her, and she presses a small piece of bread into your hand. For luck, she says, echoing the day's earlier gift. There's comfort in her presence, a sense that, even in the most secretive hours, someone is watching over the inn and all who shelter here. By midnight, the last of the secret meetings dissolve. Guests drift upstairs or out into the darkness, cloaks pulled tight. The regulars finish their mugs and take one last look around, checking the shadows for any sign of trouble. The innkeeper bars the door and banks the fire, and the tavern is silent once more, its secrets locked away until the next night's revels, the next round of whispered plans and midnight bargains. And as you lie awake in your narrow bed, you realise that the medieval tavern, more than any castle or council chamber, is where history is truly lived. In the laughter and the silence, the public feasts and the secret meetings, the endless dance between risk and refuge, trust and betrayal. Here, for a few hours, the world outside disappears, and you are part of the quiet pulse that drives it forward, one secret at a time. The late hours in a medieval tavern, those narrow hours between the end of song and the first grey hints of dawn, are a realm all their own. You watch as the crowd thins and the bravest, or perhaps the loneliest, linger over their mugs. It's here, beneath the mellow glow of dying candles, that the atmosphere shifts again. Shadows gather in the corners. The earlier warmth of community cools into watchfulness, and you sense a subtle edge behind each tired smile. Not every guest is here for good company. As the night deepens, the tavern becomes the hunting ground for another kind of regular, the thief, the trickster, and the con artist. You've heard the warnings all day, shared between cautious travellers and whispered by the innkeeper to those she trusts. Keep your purse tight and your wits tighter, she says, with a pointed look at a newcomer already on his second strong ale. For every tale of generosity and kinship, there is another about cunning pickpockets, clever cheats, and travellers who left with lighter pockets, or sometimes not at all. A trio at a side table draws your eye. They're laughing too loudly, boasting of fortunes won at dice and strange luck at the cards. One gestures broadly, flashing rings and a gleaming knife, while another keeps his back to the wall, eyes sharp and darting. They invite others to join their games, and more than one visitor, emboldened by drink or loneliness, is lured into their circle. Their games are always just slightly off, dice that roll too predictably, cards that seem to favour the house. The losses are small at first, just a coin or two, but as the night deepens and defences fall, the stakes rise. You notice the innkeeper's wariness. She drifts near the trio's table more often, her presence a silent warning that she sees what's happening. Still, she cannot always intervene. The line between luck and trickery is as thin as the line between a friendly wager and outright theft. In medieval law, the burden of proof falls heavily. Accusing someone without evidence can lead to trouble of your own. So the tavern relies on subtler systems, a sharp look, a quiet word, a sudden shortage of ale for those who overstep the unwritten rules. A fringe tidbit surfaces from the past. Some towns employed professional catchers, men or women hired by the Guild of Innkeepers to spot and expose cheats and thieves. They worked in secret, blending into the crowd, watching for patterns, warning the innkeeper if trouble threatened. Historians still argue whether these catchers were truly effective or merely another expense for already struggling tavern owners, but in a world without police, every extra pair of sharp eyes was valued. You watch as a trickster at the trio's table tries a new ruse, a shell game with 3 walnut shells and a dried pea. "Find the pea! Double your coin!" he cries. The guests watch, caught between curiosity and suspicion. The first few rounds he lets others win, paying out cheerfully. But when the bets rise, the pea disappears every time. One young man, angered by his loss, accuses the trickster of cheating. The crowd tenses. The innkeeper steps in, her face stern. She warns both men, threatening to bar them for the week. The tension dissipates, but the lesson remains. In these late hours, trust is fragile and easily broken. Theft is not always so theatrical. Sometimes it's a matter of an untied purse string, a coat slipped off the back of a bench, or a pack left by the fire while its owner steps out to the privy. Experienced thieves blend into the crowd, striking when the room is loudest or the guests most distracted. There are stories, always told in a low voice, of travellers who woke to find their boots, their horse, or even the very cloak from their back missing. The best inns have a reputation for safety, and innkeepers guard that reputation fiercely. But even the most vigilant cannot prevent every loss. You hear a joke whispered among the regulars. If you wake up with an empty purse, perhaps you paid for last night's stories. It gets a tired laugh, tinged with the hard wisdom of those who have learned caution the hard way. Another guest shares her own tale, a night in a strange town robbed while she slept, and saved only by the kindness of an old woman who found her crying by the morning fire. "Never travel without a spare coin in your shoe," she says, wiggling her toes as proof. As the room empties, another kind of danger grows. Outside, the streets are dark and silent, but within the tavern, the most desperate sometimes grow bold. Fights flare up, quick, savage, and just as quickly extinguished by the innkeeper and her staff. A man tries to slip out without paying, only to find the door barred and a pair of strong arms guiding him back to the bar. In most towns, the law will side with the innkeeper, and a reputation for losing guests can mean the ruin of a business. You learn to recognise the signs of a brewing conflict: raised voices, clenched fists, the subtle shifting of chairs as others prepare to intervene or escape. In this world, violence is never far away, but it is rarely tolerated for long. The threat of being banned from the only safe haven in miles is often enough to restore order. The innkeeper's authority is both respected and, at times, enforced with the help of loyal regulars, a blacksmith here, a farmer there, who rise to her defence when the peace is threatened. A scholarly debate persists. Did taverns attract more crime than other places? Or did they simply concentrate the dangers already present in the medieval world? Some historians argue that the presence of outsiders, travellers with unfamiliar faces and untraceable pasts, made inns targets for crime. Others point out that the close-knit community of a tavern, with its web of regulars and watchful staff, made it safer than the lonely road. Tonight you see both truths. The risk is real, but so is the protection that comes from many eyes and many hands. You reflect on the subtler forms of trickery too, the tall tales told by travelling salesmen, the fake relics hawked in the corner, the promises of miraculous cures or certain luck. Some guests fall for these ruses, handing over coins for a scrap of cloth, blessed by a saint, or a vial of water from the River Jordan. The seller always disappears before the morning, and the wiser guests shake their heads in amused resignation. If the relics worked, there'd be no sick left in France, an old woman mutters, tucking her purse deeper into her bodice. Yet for all the risk and deception, the tavern remains a place of laughter and courage. Some guests delight in matching wits with the tricksters, turning the tables and out-cheating the cheats. One night, a young man exposes a card sharp by palming his own card into the deck, revealing the ruse to a round of applause. The trickster, caught, must buy a round for the room and leaves with his pride wounded but his pockets intact. You realise too that danger and deception are not the end of the story. They are the necessary shadows that make the tavern's warmth feel real. It's in the stories of stolen purses, narrow escapes, and last-minute rescues that the bonds of community are tested and strengthened. In the world of the medieval inn, every guest is both stranger and neighbour, every night a balancing act between trust and caution. A final tale lingers as the last candle gutters out. An old man, toothless but bright-eyed, claims to have survived a dozen inns and twice as many thieves. The trick is, he says, to trust only what you can carry, and never sleep with both eyes closed. The guests laugh, the innkeeper shakes her head, and the night slides into silence. As you finally climb the creaking stairs to your bed, purse a little lighter but heart a little wiser, you reflect that in every age, the line between safety and danger is drawn not by walls, but by people. Tonight, you have seen the medieval tavern at its most vulnerable and most resilient. A place where thieves and tricksters roam, but where trust, however fleeting, can still be found in a shared joke, a watchful glance, and the promise of another dawn. Night has nearly folded the world in silence. The tavern's laughter has faded, the dice and cards are put away, and only the occasional cough or creak interrupts the hush. But you're not quite asleep, nor is anyone else who's spent time in a medieval inn. There's one more test ahead. Surviving a night's rest in the inn's beds, with all their quirks, risks, and sometimes rewards. You shuffle up to the sleeping quarters again, ducking under the low lintel, boots and belongings close at hand. You've learned the rules by now. Keep your valuables close, share what little space there is, and don't ask questions about the shifting lumps in the straw. There's an awkward grace to the routine as everyone prepares for bed, trading last words, shifting for space, and bundling up against the deepening chill. The room is dark, lit by only a single candle on the mantel. Shadows pool in the corners, and the night's last warmth seeps from the ashes in the hearth. You wedge yourself between the merchant and the peddler from the night before, grateful at least for bodies to help fight the cold. The straw beneath you is fresh enough to be only lightly scratchy. You hope the innkeeper's herbs will keep the fleas at bay until morning. It's here, in the uneasy quiet, that you truly grasp the uncertainties of medieval sleep. There's no lock on the door, only the trust of your companions and the innkeeper's vigilance to keep you safe. You wrap your cloak tighter, boots still under your head, and listen to the strange symphony of communal rest. A snore rising and falling, the soft mutter of a dreamer, the shuffle of someone adjusting their blanket, the tick and groan of the old timbers. The first challenge is simply to relax. Sleep for most medieval travellers was fitful, broken not just by the noise of neighbours, but by worries about thieves, pests, or what might lurk outside. The merchant, used to better accommodations, mutters a complaint about the lumpy bed, while the peddler simply turns over and is snoring in moments. You envy his ease, but it's hard not to wonder what would happen if a thief crept in, or a fire started, or someone in the room grew desperate. Historians still argue about just how safe these inns truly were. The answer, it seems, is that safety depended on the crowd and the keeper more than the lock or the building. Yet even in this uncertainty, there are moments of comfort. The room gradually warms as bodies settle in, breath fogging the cold air. A dog curls up at the foot of the mattress, and the inn cat finds her spot atop a pile of blankets, purring a steady lullaby. Someone hums a tune, a lullaby perhaps, or a prayer for safety. The young woman on the far side of the room ties a string around her wrist, muttering a charm against bad dreams. Such rituals are common. A prayer to St. Christopher, a twig of yew beneath the pillow, or a silver coin pressed to the chest. Quirky? Perhaps. But everyone clings to some comfort when the darkness feels endless. You try to focus on the little signs of safety. The innkeeper's quiet footsteps as she checks the door, the regular breath of those around you, the solid weight of your boots against your chest. For all the tales of trouble and trickery, most nights end without incident. The greatest threat is often the discomfort itself, bed bugs, an aching back, or the cold creeping in from the eaves. A joke floats through the dark. If you can sleep through the night, you'll wake richer, at least in stories. It draws a few tired chuckles, and you realise that, in its own way, every bad night's sleep is a tale worth retelling. You remember a story from the tavern, an unlucky traveller who snored so loudly he drove everyone else out of the room, waking to find the innkeeper had moved his bed to the stable. He said he'd never slept better, someone laughs, and the room settles once more. But sleep is not always kind. The merchant wakes, startled from a nightmare, and sits up, eyes wide in the gloom. You offer a reassuring word and he lies down again, but the mood has shifted. You realise that fear and fatigue are close companions, and the shadowy hours between midnight and dawn are when worries gnaw the deepest. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling shutters and making the beams creak. A few of the guests whisper prayers for the safety of their families, the harvest, or safe travel in the morning. There's a sense that the night is longer than the hours it holds, stretched by worry and hope, longing and regret. Historians still debate whether medieval sleep was divided into two shifts, broken by a period of wakefulness for prayer or talk. Tonight you find yourself wide awake in the middle hours, sharing a quiet conversation with the peddler about his journey, the merchant's family, and what might wait on the road ahead. Now and then, someone gets up, making their way carefully to the privy outside or to check on their horse. The door's groan wakes half the room, everyone settles again, grateful it's just a fellow traveller. You remember to check your boots, then drift into a thin, restless sleep. As the sky pales toward morning, the rhythm of the room shifts again. The first to rise are always those with the farthest to travel. They dress quietly, gather their things and slip out with soft farewells. The merchant, relieved to find his purse intact, thanks the innkeeper in a whisper, promising to recommend her inn to anyone he meets. The peddler offers you a last bit of bread for the road, and the young woman ties her string around her pack, ready to face the day's journey. You rise, stiff but grateful, and thank the innkeeper as she appears to stoke the fire and offer a jug of water for washing. She nods, face already focused on the day's new chores. You sense her pride in having seen another night pass without trouble, a small victory in a world full of hazards. Historians still debate what a good night's rest really meant in the Middle Ages. For many, it was simply waking with all your possessions, your health, and a story to tell. Comfort was a luxury, but survival was enough. As you step back into the main room, you realise that the greatest gift of the medieval inn is not a feather bed or a warm blanket, but the chance to share the dangers and discomforts of the night with others, to face the morning as part of a temporary fellowship. The day's light seeps through the window. You gather your pack and boots, bidding farewell to the merchant, the peddler, and the woman with her string. You trade stories of the night, who snored, who dreamed, who talked in their sleep, and promised to watch for each other on the road. Even the cat gets a scratch behind the ears before you leave. As you cross the threshold, you take a final look at the room. The rough straw beds, the scattered belongings, the faces, sleepy, wary, but alive. The innkeeper wishes you safe travels and hands you a scrap of bread, a small kindness for the journey ahead. Outside, the town is waking, the first smoke curling from chimneys. You join the slow stream of travellers on the road, boots thumping the ground, stories of the night swirling behind you like a faint, comforting echo. You survive the night at the inn, and while you may not have slept as deeply as you'd hoped, you carry forward what truly matters, the sense of having been part of something, if only for a few hours. In a world where tomorrow is never guaranteed, that is comfort enough. The first light of day in a medieval inn is both a relief and a reckoning. You rise slowly, joints stiff from the lumpy straw and the weight of a dozen dreams. Around you, others stir, stretching, yawning, bundling their belongings with tired hands. Sleep was patchy at best, but the sound of a cock crowing outside, the hiss of new logs thrown on the hearth, and the gentle clatter from the kitchen signal that another day has begun. And with it comes one of the most peculiar and revealing rituals of medieval travel: breakfast. You sit on the edge of your mattress, blinking at the dawn that leaks in through gaps in the shutters. The inn's main room is a different place at this hour, quieter but charged with a faint expectancy. The embers of the fire, coaxed back to life by the innkeeper's practised hand, fill the air with the sharp scent of wood smoke and boiling porridge. Here, breakfast is less a meal and more a negotiation, a delicate balancing act between what's available, what you can afford, and what the innkeeper is willing or able to provide. You join the slow-moving line at the serving board, bowl in hand, and wait as the first pot is uncovered. The smell is earthy and vaguely sweet. Oat porridge, bulked up with whatever's at hand, bits of dried apple, a scrape of honey, sometimes just a pinch of salt or yesterday's stale crusts. You ladle a portion into your bowl and find a place at the long communal table. The food is simple, nourishing, and sometimes dull, but you're grateful for its warmth and solidity after the rigours of the night. This morning, you're lucky. The innkeeper has managed to trade for a clutch of eggs, and a few are boiled and sliced among the guests. A rare treat, their yellow yolks glowing like tiny suns. There's a slab of hard cheese making the rounds, and a basket of yesterday's bread, sliced and toasted over the embers until crisp. You watch as travellers barter for extra scraps. A coin here, a favour promised there. The wealthy merchant secures an extra egg for a silver penny, while the peddler swaps a spool of thread for a heel of cheese. The young woman with the string charm simply smiles and is handed a second helping of porridge. Sometimes kindness buys what coin cannot. The innkeeper, already busy with preparations for the day ahead, moves quietly among the tables. She offers gentle greetings to those departing, a sharper word to late sleepers, and an ever-watchful eye on the children who dart beneath benches hunting for dropped crumbs. Her staff clears mugs and bowls, washing them in a basin set by the door and drying them on rough cloths. You join the others, offering a quiet thanks for the food and a quick prayer, one learned from your mother or picked up on the road, hoping for luck and safety on the journey ahead. As you eat, you're drawn into the slow swirl of conversation. Travellers exchange news from distant towns, a fair opening next week, a new bridge completed over the river, a bishop's visit rumoured for the next market day. One guest shares a warning, a new toll at the city gates, enforced by surly guards. Another grumbles about the rising cost of salt, and there is much nodding. Salt is not just for flavour, but for preserving what little food can be saved from one day to the next. A quirky tidbit. In some parts of Europe, it was common for guests to bring their own small stash of spices or salt, tucked away in a pouch and produced only at meals. A pinch of cinnamon or a dusting of pepper could transform a dull bowl of porridge into something special. This morning you watch as the merchant surreptitiously sprinkles a little spice over his bread, earning a few envious glances. The innkeeper pretends not to notice. She knows better than to ask how or where he acquired such a luxury. The breakfast hour also brings its own etiquette. At the table, conversation is quiet and respectful, laughter subdued. There's a sense that everyone is gathering themselves, preparing for the day ahead. Some travellers eat quickly and slip away, eager to make the most of daylight. Others linger, spinning out their last few bites, reluctant to step back into the uncertainties of the road. A few regulars, perhaps with nowhere particular to go, nurse mugs of weak ale or watered wine, listening for any scrap of news that might break the monotony of their routine. Children are part of the scene too. A boy, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, is sent to fetch water from the well. A little girl, hair in wild tangles, helps her mother collect scraps of bread for the chickens. Their presence is a gentle reminder that the inn is more than a business. It's a home, a workplace, and for a few hours each morning a haven for those without anywhere else to go. Once the worst of hunger is satisfied, the ritual of preparation begins. Travellers check their packs and purses, brush dust from their cloaks, and retie laces on shoes worn thin by the road. Some inspect their animals, horses, mules, even the occasional donkey, brushing coats, tightening girths, or soothing a fretful beast with a kind word and a crust of bread. The inn's yard is a scene of quiet industry. Stable hands mucking out stalls, a groom counting harnesses, chickens scratching at the earth in search of a missed crumb. It's also a time for farewells. Each guest offers thanks to the innkeeper, who receives them with a mixture of pride and weary grace. Promises are made to return or send word of the road ahead. In a world where letters are precious and roads unpredictable, these promises are part wish, part ritual. The merchant bows deeply, promising to speak well of the inn to every town he visits. The peddler hugs the innkeeper's daughter, pressing a tiny hand-carved whistle into her palm. The young woman with the string charm slips away quietly, leaving behind a wild flower plucked from the roadside as a token of thanks. As the room empties, you linger for a moment by the fire, finishing your bread and listening to the final scraps of conversation. You realise that breakfast in the medieval inn is about more than food. It's a ceremony of transition, a moment of shared comfort before the world opens wide, and each traveller becomes once again a solitary figure moving through fields and forests. For a little while, you have been part of a makeshift family, tied together by need and proximity. In a few hours, the faces around the table will blur into memory, but the sense of connection will linger long after you've taken to the road. As you make your final preparations to leave, the innkeeper approaches with a last gift, a small square of cloth, still warm from the fire. "For the dust," she says, pressing it into your hand with a smile. You tuck it into your pack, grateful not only for its practical use, but for what it represents. A little bit of care to carry forward, a reminder that even the hardest road is made softer by small kindnesses. You step outside, blinking in the brightening sun, and look back once more at the inn. The windows are open now, the shutters thrown wide to let in fresh air. The sounds of cleaning and morning laughter drift out. A rooster crows from somewhere behind the stable, and the day's business has already begun. You join the trickle of departing guests, boots crunching on gravel, hearts a little lighter for the night's shelter and the morning's meal. On the road ahead, the memories of this breakfast, the warmth of porridge, the murmur of voices, the gentle gifts exchanged, will sustain you as surely as the food itself. And as you glance back at the inn, growing smaller with every step, you realise that the true measure of hospitality is not the grand gestures or the feast days, but the quiet, everyday rituals of care that greet each dawn. Stepping away from the morning bustle, you find yourself pondering what it means to be a regular in a medieval tavern or inn. You have seen the travellers come and go, merchants on urgent business, pilgrims with scallop shells on their hats, minstrels trailing rumours and songs. Yet it's the regulars, those who return night after night, who form the slow-beating heart of these places. In a world always on the move, a regular is a rare and curious thing. Their presence is instantly recognisable. As you step back in for a midday drink, the same faces greet you from favoured seats. The blacksmith whose boots never leave the warmest spot by the hearth, the retired soldier whose laughter rolls louder than the evening songs, the wise old woman whose gossip reaches farther than the town crier's bell. The innkeeper greets each by name, asking after their families, their fields, their aches and pains. They nod in return, settling into routines as familiar as prayer. Being a regular isn't just a matter of frequency. It's a relationship built over years, even generations. You soon realise there's a rhythm and privilege to this status. A favourite mug, a place at the table reserved by silent agreement, a knowing glance that saves words. Newcomers may fumble for the rules, but regulars move with ease, their every gesture part of the choreography that keeps the inn running smoothly. If there's a dispute over a bench, it's the regulars who settle it. If someone grows rowdy, it's their steady hands that guide things back to peace. Their stories are woven into the very bones of the building. The blacksmith remembers the year the old roof nearly fell in. The old woman recalls the plague, the famine, and the fire that scorched the neighbouring barn. Their tales are more than entertainment. They're a living memory, the history of the village held in flesh and laughter. You find yourself drawn into their circle, listening as they recount a fight that once broke out over a spilled mug, or the night a lost sheep wandered into the common room and refused to leave until dawn. It's not all nostalgia. The regulars are the eyes and ears of the village, the unofficial news gatherers and rumour weavers. Each brings a piece of the world to the table, a merchant's latest gossip from the next market town, a shepherd's tale of a wolf seen near the fields, a widow's whisper about a new magistrate's taxes. Information is exchanged as freely as bread and salt. "Have you heard about the bridge washed out by last week's storm?" someone asks, and the conversation ripples, advice and warnings dispensed with a quiet authority. A quirky tidbit. In some towns, regulars earn the right to carve their initials into the tavern's beams, or to hang a personal mug behind the bar. You spot these tokens? A worn clay cup with a faded crest, a patch of wood scored with names and dates, a rough carving of a dog or a plough. Each mark is a badge of belonging, proof that, whatever the world outside may bring, there is a place reserved for them here. Yet the role of the regular is not just social, it's practical. They help keep the inn afloat in lean times, buying an extra round when the mood is slow, or covering a stranger's bill when a traveller runs short. The innkeeper in turn grants small favours, an extra hunk of bread, a corner by the fire on the coldest nights, a whispered tip about which merchant is fair and which one cheats at scales. There is a mutual loyalty here, a web of small kindnesses that keeps the whole fragile system from unravelling. Historians still debate how much power regulars truly wielded in their local taverns. Some believe they acted as informal leaders, arbiters of disputes and keepers of the peace. Others argue that their influence was softer, a moral compass, a source of gentle correction when someone strayed from the accepted ways. Tonight, as a newcomer complains about the ale, the blacksmith answers not with anger, but with a joke, and the mood eases. The regulars keep the peace, but they do so with warmth and a kind of familial authority. It's not all goodwill and harmony, of course. Rivalries exist. Old grudges over borrowed tools, a debt never fully repaid, a youthful romance gone sour. But these tensions rarely boil over. The regulars know the value of community, the dangers of letting anger fester. Instead, disputes are handled with words, sometimes a bout of arm wrestling, or a wager on the next market's weather. In a world without courts for every quarrel, the tavern's regulars are the judges, the jury, and if necessary, the peacemakers. You notice the subtler rituals too. When a newcomer enters, it's the regulars who size them up first. A quick exchange of glances, a murmur to the innkeeper. Trust is earned, not given, and only after a few nights' good behaviour do the jokes soften and a seat open by the fire. You sense, as you watch this dance, how much the safety of the whole depends on the judgment of the few. A scholarly debate circles the notion of public houses as true community centres. Some see them as cradles of democracy, where every voice, at least every man's voice, could be heard. Others point to the lines of gender, wealth and status that kept many at the margins. Tonight, you see both. The regulars are the gatekeepers, yes, but also the guardians of a fragile inclusiveness. A poor widow, welcomed with a warm mug and a place at the table, thanks them with a shy smile. A rough labourer new to the village is given a task, hauling wood for the fire, instead of a cold shoulder. There are playful moments too. One night, the innkeeper organises a contest. Who can tell the tallest tale? Who can guess the number of beans in a jar? Who can balance a spoon on their nose the longest? The regulars, competitive but kind, cheer each other on, letting the children win as often as not. Laughter fills the rafters, and for an hour the world's worries are held at bay. As dusk settles, the regulars are the last to leave. They bank the fire, help the innkeeper sweep the floor, share a final mug and a last round of stories. They promise to return tomorrow, if the weather holds, if the wife lets me, if the cows don't calve in the night. The promise is always half serious, half joke, but the intention is real. For these men and women, the tavern is more than shelter or entertainment. It's a second home. Before you go, you're invited to carve your initials into a low beam, a sign that if only for a moment you too belong. You borrow a dull knife, scratch your mark among the others, and feel a quiet pride as the regulars nod approval. You step outside into the cool night, the tavern windows glowing behind you. The laughter and the warmth linger, and you understand that the world beyond the threshold is always just a little colder, a little lonelier, without these rituals of belonging. In the days ahead, whether on the road or at another table, you'll remember this place not for the food or the ale, but for the company of the regulars, their jokes, their kindness, their stories, and their unwavering ability to turn a house of strangers into a home. As the weeks pass and the roads lead you to inns and taverns from sun-baked southern towns to the rainy green of the north, you discover that every establishment has its own soul. No two are quite alike. Some are grand, sprawling affairs, once manor houses or way stations on ancient Roman roads, their timbers thick with history and legend. Others are little more than a kitchen and a hearth, squeezed between market stalls or standing lonely at a crossroads battered by wind and time. Yet, for all their differences, you find yourself measuring each by the same unspoken scale. The welcome at the door, the weight of the bed, the taste of the bread, and above all the life of the crowd. You arrive, sometimes weary and footsore, other times flush with coin and high spirits. The signs out front promise clean straw or good ale, sometimes beds for honest men or rooms for gentlefolk, and you know enough by now to take these claims with a grain of salt, often literally. In some places, the promise of a feather bed is as thin as the blanket provided, and good ale may be yesterday's brew with a new pinch of herbs. Still, you step inside, heart lifted by the soft glow of firelight and the rough music of voices. The first moment inside any inn or tavern is always a little test. The hush as you enter, the pause in conversation, the eyes that measure and weigh. Regulars nod to each other. The innkeeper gives a brisk greeting, and you know to wait for her invitation before taking a seat. Sometimes you're welcomed with a smile, sometimes with wary silence. If you have a reference, a friend's name, a town's greeting, you offer it now, and it smooths your way. Otherwise you trust your luck and your manners. Every room holds its own hierarchy, its own fragile society. In some places the wealthy and the poor share benches and bowls. In others, a low wooden rail or a line of battered shields separates the high from the humble. You learn to read the room, where the apprentices cluster, where the merchants do business, where the travellers share news of the road. The children know these rules instinctively, darting between legs and benches, learning early which faces are friendly and which to avoid. You notice small details everywhere, the way the mugs are stacked, the ribbons on the barmaid's cap, the herbs hanging from the rafters to ward off sickness and flies. Some inns are known for their specialities: an onion soup with a secret spice, a loaf of bread as dense as stone but twice as nourishing, a sharp, fruity cider that leaves the tongue tingling. You savour each, grateful for variety in a world where hunger and monotony are close companions. Historians still debate whether the best inns truly offered a better life, or whether the difference was mostly in the company kept. Tonight, you find both sides of the argument. The room is a little warmer, the fire brighter, the welcome a shade kinder, simply because of the laughter and conversation swirling through the air. Here a minstrel tunes his lute and sings an old ballad, his voice rising above the clink of mugs. There a priest tells a joke about the bishop's mule, and the whole table erupts in laughter. You meet travellers of every stripe. Some are grim, silent and self-contained, their stories locked away behind tired eyes. Others are eager to share: a merchant who's crossed the Alps, a scholar with a head full of questions, a farmer who knows every back road and secret ford. You learn to ask gentle questions and to listen more than you speak. In return, you gather a patchwork of the world, news from distant lands, a rumour of war, the latest price for wool or salt. A quirky tidbit emerges in one riverside inn, a custom where travellers are invited to add a mark to a large wooden traveller's tree, carved with names and symbols from half the known world. You watch as a sailor from Brittany burns a tiny anchor into the bark, while a pilgrim scratches a scallop shell beside it. Each sign is a promise to return, to remember, to carry the memory of this place onward. You add your own symbol, something small and private, and feel strangely comforted by the ritual. Sometimes the world outside the inn presses in, a rainstorm that keeps everyone huddled by the fire for hours, or a passing band of soldiers demanding food and beds. You watch as the innkeeper negotiates, part diplomat, part general, managing to keep both her regulars and the strangers satisfied, or at least not openly angry. There are tense moments, but more often there is relief. The fire keeps burning, the stew pot keeps bubbling, and the walls of the inn seem to hold back the worst of the world's dangers, if only for one night. The hours pass with a rhythm all their own. Afternoon drifts into evening, mugs refilled, stories growing bolder. A scholarly debate begins in one corner, whether the town's miller cheats at his weights, or if the new lord's taxes will mean ruin or renewal. You see how the tavern or inn is not just a place to eat and sleep, but the pulse of the town itself, the unofficial council chamber, theatre and sanctuary rolled into one. Some inns surprise you with unexpected rituals, a guest book written not with pen and ink but with carvings on the doorframe, or a tapestry where travellers add a coloured thread. One night, you witness a local wedding feast. Bride and groom seated at the head table, every guest invited to toast their fortune. The whole room sings and weeps, strangers and friends alike drawn together by the sheer force of the moment. You notice that even the animals are woven into the fabric of inn life. The stable cat has her own spot on the hearth, the dog patrols for scraps and stray feet, and the hens in the yard provide eggs for breakfast and a little comic relief as they dart through open doors. Children and animals alike are both cherished and disciplined, learning their places in the tight choreography of a crowded world. Night always brings its own change of mood. The lights dim, the stories grow stranger, the company more intimate. You find yourself sharing confessions with a companion who will vanish at dawn, or listening to an old man recall the day the road was first paved, or the river flooded and changed the course of every journey since. Sometimes there is danger, a fight that flares and fizzles, a theft discovered and quietly dealt with, a sickness that keeps everyone watchful, a scholarly debate that refuses to die. Was the tavern a force for disorder or order? Tonight, as you watch the regulars calm a drunken argument and the innkeeper soothe a crying child, you see how much depends on the people who fill the space, not the stones or the sign outside. The building is only half the story. The rest is the tangled web of human hopes, fears and habits that are spun anew each night. In the final hours before sleep, you look back over your shoulder and realise you have become part of this web, a thread in the vast tapestry of medieval life, woven through 1,000 meals, 1,000 songs, 1,000 fireside stories. You remember the faces, the jokes, the taste of the bread and ale, the sound of rain on the shutters, the feeling of being sheltered when the world outside seemed impossible. Tomorrow you will move on, as all travellers must. The inn or tavern you leave behind will fill with new faces, new voices, new stories, but for now, you let yourself rest, heart full of gratitude for the fleeting, imperfect, irreplaceable gift of shared company and warmth. So now, as the inn's lights flicker low and the quiet settles around you, let's slow everything down together. Imagine you're stretched out once more on that humble straw bed, the night's last embers glowing softly at the hearth. The voices and laughter, the distant footsteps, the low songs, they've all faded now into a gentle hush, replaced by the steady rhythm of breathing all around you. There's a warmth in the air, not just from the fire, but from the nearness of others, companions in rest, each dreaming their own small dreams just a few feet away. Let your shoulders drop and breathe in the subtle scents. Wood smoke, wool, maybe the faintest whiff of herbs drying above the window. You feel the weight of blankets, rough but comforting, and the easy security of boots tucked safely beneath your head. Every ache from the day is softened by the knowledge that, for tonight at least, you are sheltered, you are fed, you are not alone. Outside the world is vast and shadowed. Cold wind rattles the shutters, a distant dog barks, a rooster crows against the darkness. But within these walls, time itself seems to slow. Each small discomfort, the creak of the floor, the sigh of a restless sleeper, the snore of a neighbour, becomes familiar, almost reassuring. You are part of something timeless, an endless cycle of travel, arrival and departure, of stories shared and mornings greeted in fellowship. Let yourself drift in this quiet company. The flicker of candlelight fades to darkness. Tomorrow's road can wait. Tonight you are simply a soul at rest among other souls, safe in the gentle care of an old world inn where the oldest comforts are never truly lost. The fire dies to a final orange glow. You close your eyes, letting go of the road behind and ahead, and breathe a little deeper, a little slower. May you carry the peace of this medieval night into your own dreams. You are sheltered, remembered, and, if only for a few hours, home. Sweet dreams.